Hello and welcome to Turning Point Tactics, the competitive Kill Team 40k podcast, focused on giving you the strategies and tactics to seize initiative every turning point. I'm your host Ryan, and I'm joined by a very special guest, not just one of the best players in the UK, but one of the best players in the world. In the 2023 ITC, he finished second in the UK, fourth globally, and first worldwide with novitiates. I'm joined by Bart Lewandowski. Bart, how are you doing today?
Hi Ryan, not too bad. Thank you for having me. And hello to everyone listening to the podcast. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good, and obviously it's a good time to get you on because effectively we've had a balanced data slate release recently. We've had a whole new, couple of new teams been injected into the meta. So we're going to try and rank the teams, I think, and see where they sit at the end of it. And it's useful to get a second opinion. But for anyone who isn't or hasn't heard of you before and is listening to the show, could you maybe just do a quick introduction, tell them who you are, and maybe why you play Kill Team?
Yeah, of course. Thanks a lot. So my name is Bart. I come from Poland. I live in London. This is where I play Kill Team mostly. The reason why I play Kill Team is because I'm a competitive nerd. I used to play Magic the Gathering, and these days I play Kill Team. It was supposed to be a less competitive game, but for me at least, but this is what we ended up with. So here we are.
One of the major achievements that I think that I have left off from the initial introduction is actually a sort of a team achievement, right? So could you maybe tell me a little bit about the old ones?
Yeah, so the old ones are a London-based team focused on Kill Team, which has been created by myself, Serkan, and Guy Barton after one of the events in London where we thought we should create some of competition to your team and LWG, and we thought, let's start a new team, and then we grew up to 6 players right now. So there's myself, Guy, and Dan Barton, Serkan, Dave, and Nick. And shout out to all of my teammates. We managed to get to number 1 team place in 2023 ITC season for Kill Team. So I think it's a good achievement for us. And that will be the bit about the old ones.
It is an absolutely amazing achievement, and the team has so many good players, right? So for anyone that was probably watching my stream, was it last weekend, the weekend before? Can't remember, dates all blur together, but they watched me get smashed by Serkan with his Felgor, and obviously they saw me have a very, very close game against Guy with the Wormblade, and it came down to a single point. So these are, like, in my opinion, the top players in the UK, and I'm hoping that we're going to see quite a few of them make it out to the World Champs this year, because I think that'd be an awesome thing for us to be able to show the rest of the world what the British community can do, and the strength of it, and then also get a few more people a bit more airtime to let them be recognised globally for where they sit within the community. And other plans we have this year is also to attend the WTC with them. So there's a whole bunch of really cool stuff that's on the horizon. So that would be a very strong team, I think, going into it. But the focus of... Sorry, you go ahead,
Yeah. I think it would be a great thing to get more players to World Championship. Like, funnily enough, Dan Barton actually qualified last year. It was just that he was a tad too young to participate in last year's event, but this year I think, I don't want to say I'm sure, but I think he will be going there. So hopefully we'll manage to add a few more players to the ranks of all those representing GB. By the way, I watched that game of yours with Serkan. It was a great poison grenade from Toxform.
5 ups, 3 in a row. That's the way to do it. And I was like, God damn, that's really effective. You absolutely nailed it. But to be fair, like, I think that game was set not just from that. I think his positioning across the board was excellent, just to continually threat range the objectives really well. And I couldn't really push the goats off the objectives without being in a charge situation where I get tangled up. So I think he played it exactly the way he needed to play it, which is really good. But you're absolutely right on the roster front for this year's World Championships, because 2 golden tickets were handed out at that Nottingham tournament. So Chris Scott-Bloor, who people might have heard of from the last World Championships, went out to support the UK as part of the team out there, and he's going again, and also Matt Surridge is another guy who's an amazing player, a absolute gentleman, and is very welcome as well. So myself, Dan, Matt, and Chris hopefully are the first four, but there is a lot more tickets on the way. I'm just confirming dates and stuff and locking it in, but hopefully my tournament on the 7th and 8th of September will have not one but 2 golden tickets. I'm hoping for it to be 128 players. So if we can get 128 players, it'll be funded. Like, I'll be able to get people out there and pay for it. If we get less than 128 players, it might be partially funded. If we get less than 60 players, I'll be not making money. So let's not worry about that too much.
I think it will be a massive event, and just like the one last year. Like, you kept shouting out about that event for a very long time, and ultimately it was a great event. We had a ton of fun. And I played with Commandos, so I had even more fun than most other players. So I think it will be a guaranteed success, the one in September. So I'm pleased to hear that you're putting together another massive event together.
And we'll see what happens, because I'm hoping we'll get loads of people from the international community come over as well, because funded places, 128 players, it should be great for your ITC points, great for the competitive vibes, and because it's a 2-day event, there'll be a big social in the evening, so we'll hopefully be able to get all the communities together as we did last time and have some real good fun. So without further ado, though, because you have mentioned Commandos, so we do need to get into the tier list, because obviously the big golden, the big green boys need to get placed somewhere between S and D, and it's probably going to be closer to S than it is D. But I think we'll just get straight into it, because there's so many teams, and even if we spend 2 minutes on a team, we'll probably be here for a long old time. So I think Commandos is probably the good place to start, because you have a lot of experience with Commandos. You did a really good performance with them last season. So what's your thoughts on Commandos post Balanced Data Slate? Where do you think they sit? And do you think they've been hit hard by it, or not as much as people might think?
So I think, so the nerfs that are definitely significant, and at least in my opinion, and they will impact the win rate of Commandos, and I'd say the easiness of leading that team. However, I still think that the team does what it used to do, or what they want to do, which is acting as a durable horde, trying to play the objectives, and they still do that in many aspects. And people say, oh yeah, but you can take a critical now and you cannot just scratch it. Yeah, that is true, and in some cases you'll die thanks to that, because of that. But at the same time, I still think that they're a very strong team, and one that will prove to be difficult for many opponents. And for that reason, I still believe they're sitting, or should sit, somewhere in the S tier.
Okay, that's interesting. So I think, for me, my only thoughts on them is, for a lot of their matchups, there is now an element of a dice game. Whereas before, I think they've always had unreliable melee. Now the 2EP choppers are very unreliable, but I think they have routes around that, right? They can take the sledgehammers, they can take other.
Oh yeah. We can just, on many maps, people say, oh yeah, but choppers are ineffective right now. Yeah, but this means that you can drop Breacher Boy, so you have one less operative that needs a chopper, and then you take 2 sledgehammers plus dynamite, or you take 2 sledgehammers plus some climbing ropes and a sticky bomb. So I think it should still work. I've had games which I managed to win with Commandos, not performing a single fight action throughout the game myself. So just because they're still not really reliable. So you score early, you shoot to kill wherever the opponent gives you a chance to shoot at them, and you don't really need to, or charge and be very loud with your choppers. What I found quite effective is trying to take the points, then when an opponent tries to take them back, use Justice Scratch defensively. Sometimes, especially into elites, when they charge you and they want to bash your orc into the ground, if you use Justice Scratch correctly, sometimes you'll be able to punch them twice, which means that your follow-up orc will be able to finish off the elite operative. But all things considered, I think they're still in S tier, and I personally don't think that we need to actually knock them down to the ground and see them in the deep sea. But yeah, they're still a very strong team, definitely.
So the interesting thing for me is the choice of buffs and nerfs here. So I personally think, and I sort of said this the other day when I was talking about the balance changes, that the change to just a scratch will affect the casual players far more than it's going to affect the competitive players. Because I think the true strength of Commandos is kind of what you alluded to already, right? It's the ability to get onto objectives early, contest objectives, and deny your opponent the ability to score. So what I would have liked to have seen personally is, rather than change just a scratch, and we can maybe keep that change, but I think taking Shush away from turn one would massively help in ITD, because they have such board presence in ITD, it's insane. And then the forward deploy wouldn't be able to start on objectives. I think the combination of those two things, because if you let the forward deploy not start on objectives, they'll just shush them onto an objective turn one anyway. So it doesn't change anything. But the combination of those two would really slow down, I think, the early scoring potential of Commandos, and also stop them from just contesting all the objectives that they can very, very early on, and really hurt them in ITD, I think, where they are currently very, very strong. And if you did that, you could probably keep just a scratch the way it was. But maybe that's just me. I think the rest of the changes, as we've covered, I don't think they're that impactful. I think they probably are now towards the bottom of S tier. We'll see what other teams arrive later. But I still think they're going to be, I think, A or S tier. I think they're still going to be at the top. They're going to be doing well. A lot of their damage remains the same, and they're just taking different equipment now. So I think that's kind of a. I think we both agree where they sit, right? So,
yeah, I think so. And if we are to move on, if I may suggest something to keep the interest of the listeners or on YouTube viewers, what do you think about void dances right now?
Oh, void dances. That is a good question. So I think there's a lot of salt, right, about the changes to void dancers, particularly the fact that they now have to pay for traverse. Weirdly, I kind of like that change in a sense that it makes barricades matter, and it's always a weird thing when you're playing void dancers and you just sit there and go, yeah, I'm just going to put these barricades down, but actually it's just for me, not for you. So that was,
Ryan,
that was a weird experience.
you like that change because you haven't spent tens of hours painting the diamond pattern like so many other players, including myself, and that's why. Oh yeah, that change makes sense. I personally hate it, but at least now I can look at my void dancers on the shelf, perfectly lit, and enjoy them this way.
But I guess the question is like, is it going to be too much for them? And I think potentially it will be. I was thinking about how much movement reduction they've received, and before, obviously, their threat range is just like always like 9 inches, right? So they're just charging wherever they want to go and ending within 1 inch. Whereas now, if they pay the 2 up, 2 down, it's going to be like a 5 inch threat range, and that is significantly less. So is it too much? Probably. I think they're now going to sit like B minus, B tier. Like, okay. I don't think they're bad. Like, I still think they're going to be able to do stuff. I still think they've got some really strong ploys, but I don't think they're going to be as good as they once were.
So I would say B minus, and the reason for that is the nerf to fly ability is only one thing. We also need to consider all the other teams that appeared in the meta and how the meta is shaped as a whole. And I don't really think that they have too many matchups which they would love to play these days. And like with, let's say, the comeback of Pathfinders. I know it's not the worst matchup, but it's not the easiest either. You still have Commandos. You have Felgor. You have other teams which can prove to be problematic for them from melee perspective. Or even the police might not be the easiest matchup with how they play out, like with shotguns and reroll prevention, the powerful flashlight equipment. So there's that. But yeah, like this is like all things considered, combining the impact of the nerfs and the surroundings of the metagame, I think I rate them quite low these days.
Yeah, so I definitely agree with the teams that I think we're going to see at the top. I don't think is going to favour them, if that makes sense. And you mentioned like the space cops, the RBTs. Like you have to then tech into taking the brutal weapons, and then just like literally hope your opponent doesn't roll a six. Is your only like way to be able to like get around it. And even then, they still hit you for 4 damage. So you're still taking damage every time you go and fight those guys. So I agree with you. And I think some of the teams that we're going to see rising towards the top of the meta are particularly bad for Void Dancers. So I think B- is probably fair. I think they can still play well, and I think good players will still do well with them. But I think you're more likely now to hit into a matchup that you can't solve, where before you could probably use your movement to get around it, whereas now you're probably not going to be able to achieve that. So maybe, and I think the easiest way to give them a little kickback would just be removing the having to pay for traverse. I think that seems. I mean, it's thematic, right? That they could do that, and probably an unnecessary thing to them. Even though I like it as a competitive player because I can use barricades in a sneaky way. All right, so let's press on.
Barricades are broken.
Barricades are broken. Bam, barricades. Barricades belong in D tier. I think it's worth touching on another team that has received some love recently, the Warp Coven. So I've actually played some games with Warp Coven recently. Have you played any games at all with the new team?
So I haven't played them since they got the buffs or maybe not even the buffs, the redesign of the rules. But I had a conversation with one of my teammates recently, and we thought that at least prior to the release of Nightmare, I would rate them quite high when it comes to the league teams. We'll obviously see how we consider them in comparison to the new elite team. But yeah, you put them in B, and I think this is where they should sit. I would say around mid B.
Yeah. So I played a game with them the other day. They are better. They are definitely better than they were before. I love the extra wound on the Zangles. I think it's great. It's probably their most impactful change, which is a weird thing, but it is. And they're still fundamentally they're a melee team because the sorcerer's shooting is just unreliable and like I don't know why, but it either seems to do absolutely nothing or just explode stuff, and I can't really grasp why, but just the profiles. They are skewed. I think they're significantly better on ITD, which is a weird one, but because that shooting, as I said, it's all blast or torrent or whatever.
And is it that the crit knockdown on the equipment for sorcerers now works every single turning point?
Yes, that is also huge, which particularly in melee.
So yeah, between that and the +1 wound on Zangos, they actually got quite a chunky buff when it comes to the wound count across the whole team.
Absolutely.
So yeah.
But as you sort of touched on, I still think they have issues with like number of activations is obviously a problem. You'll probably want to run more Zangles than you ever have done before. So you're probably going 3 sorcerers, 6 Zangles, something like that, which is nice. But I don't know how good it's going to be when you start going against teams that are very good at potentially melee. And there's some teams that have just been released that we might want to talk about that are particularly good at melee. And the sorcerer is being 4 attacks. If you start reducing attack dice from that sort of pool, suddenly your melee monsters become not very good at all, and that becomes really scary for you. So they're good. I think B is a fair place for them. They're definitely better than what they were. I think you can now do stuff with them, but they still have their limits. And I think middle of the pack is probably fair.
Okay. I have a suggestion for a very controversial placement, by the way.
Okay.
And I'm sure that's going to trigger plenty of comments on YouTube. And my controversial statement is Hand of the Archon is one of the 4 worst teams in the game. What do you think about that?
So I also agree with this. um, I will put them in C tier, because and so
Because you really want those comments just to keep the
yeah,
publicity
because I love
up.
the hate. I love the hate, obviously. And I should say that this is just opinion, guys. Like, I know there's some very good players out there running Hand of the Archon that are doing well with them. This is not talking about player skill. It's talking about the team's potential. Um,
And
but
specifically what we think about them. Maybe we don't
yeah,
have that Hand of the Archon, Emo Drukari, Juggernaut in our local community,
yeah.
and that's why we rate them so low.
But I guess the main issue I have with them is the way fleet works is it's better, but they're having to spend for their movement every turn. So it's a constant CP tax to do the things that elves normally do. And B, like, if the ball doesn't get rolling, then it never does. And so, if you haven't achieved kills, like you need your opponent to misplay turn one to give you some early kills, to get the pain tokens, to then get you into a position turning point two where you can steamroll them. And they do feel like one of those teams where either you win 24-5 or you lose 5-24. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
they're really weird in the way their mechanic works. But what thoughts do you have on them?
Yeah, so I think that generally speaking, this team hasn't got enough APL to do what they need to do to get the ball rolling. This is exactly what you mentioned, which brings them down to a team which has to, I'd say they have to overextend to get the ball rolling. But if you're facing a good opponent that can out-activate you or that can counterplay your overextension, which is in a way forced by the nature of this team, then it's going to be pretty hard. So yes, they do have good killing potential. Yes, they have that fancy grenade trick, which is also great and can catch some players off guard. But all things considered, like 9 models with 2 APL and no comms, right?
Yeah, and that's it. And they're quite fragile. I know they have a 6-up feel no pain, but I don't know what it is. But whenever I have a 6-up feel no pain, I don't have a feel no pain. It never works for me. 5-up seems to give me though 50% increase. I don't understand the difference, but it is insane. like, so they're not that durable. You don't have enough activations to be able to sort of wait out a lot of teams. I know you can versus elites, but a lot of teams you can't. So as you say, you end up not securing a kill, or you get greedy turning point one, get the kill, but then the model's exposed. So that becomes a late turning point one kill for your opponent, and you're in exactly the same place that you were always in. So I completely agree with you. APL
Yeah,
efficiency is a big
and
issue.
sometimes it's just a numbers game, right? Even if you have like 9 models, 8 of which will be very killy, if your opponent has more models, they can play the mission slightly better than you, and because you're on 2 APL, in most cases, what you'll do, you'll charge and kill and then be killed, or you'll move and shoot and kill and then be killed, which means that it's hard for you to come up with the upper hand after the trade. And if you get to the attrition game, it's not great. So yeah, there's that.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to try and pick a team that I think is in A tier, and I'll see if you agree. I'm going to go with Illicidian Starstriders. I think are A tier, probably right at the bottom of A tier, but
Hmm.
I think they're in there. And I'll sort of explain my logic for this. Is I think they have one of the best toolkits in the game, but they just have some particularly bad matchups. so,
Yeah.
so like against a lot of teams, they are fantastic, and I think they also play far better when you have like quick rounds. Like the quicker the games are, the more likely you are to make your opponent to make a mistake, right? So if you're playing like a 2 hour, 3 hour round, they don't perform as well because your opponent has longer to figure out where the mistakes are. But when you're playing quick rounds, they've got a really good toolkit, and they're fantastic. They've got durability boosts, they've got good lethality, and they play the mission really well as it currently stands. I think they're A tier. I do think, however, they suck into commandos. I think they suck into Galapox, probably
Felgo.
Felgor. They're definitely suckle to
So yeah,
Felgor.
so as much as I can like agree with, let's say, top of B plus, bottom of A,
Mm,
the way I look at them is that, as you put it, like they will struggle against certain teams that, at least in my opinion, will see them at the very top. And yeah, if we put them in A, like looking at A tier, like I'd say we're looking at a tier where we have a spread of teams that are very good, and depending on how well those teams go into the absolute best teams in the game, will put them in either top A or bottom A or maybe even B plus. So this is how I see it. And for
mm.
that reason, I think yes, they're definitely capable. They probably have a higher skill ceiling than many other teams, just because of how many tricks you have, how many potential alpha strikes or turning point to alpha strikes you have. And at the same time, how fragile you are to certain punchbacks. Like someone just going with a counter punch against you. That then yeah. But yeah, all things considered, I would place them somewhere between like bottom A, top of B plus. So yeah, like
I think what we'll do is we'll see how the rest of this tier fills
oh yeah,
out,
of
and it might be
course.
that they drop down because generically, like the way I look at it, like the way their assets work means that they have in some of their like AP2 weapons or their AP2 weapon, they have durability because so many different people can call it in. It's really hard to actually remove it without killing lots of people. Um,
Yeah. Pro
and
tip for today: don't try to shoot the starship, shooting down the lasers. That's not gonna
yeah,
work.
you can't put a grudge on a starship. So so
That's
yeah,
sad.
yeah, they're either going to be top of B plus or bottom of A, and I guess we'll leave them there for now, and then we'll see what falls out. All right, what team do you want to cover off next?
um, Maybe let's look at one of your favorites. Let's look at Exaction.
Oh, okay. So I think Exaction needed or could have done with a buff in the last balanced data slate. Um, I was actually pretty amazed that they didn't receive one. I don't really know why. I think maybe it was just because that I guess they're doing okay, but I've never seen Exaction win much. I'm trying to think if they've won any
Well,
tournaments.
flashlights are clearly broken, so yeah.
Yeah. That is their best thing, right? The best thing is that you can annoy your opponent with flashlights. So I think they're going to be probably in B minus.
Yeah, so I'd say I would probably agree. However, I would place them over the Void Dancers. I think they should
That's
be.
interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I think that they should be a bit more effective than Void Dancers these days. And the way I look at Exaction Squad, they will be quite the opposite of Elucidian Star Striders in a way, and that way is that they will be uh, quite average and good in the hands of a good player. However, they will have certain matchups where they will prove to be really good. Like I think, like when I last played against them versus Mikkel, who's one of the
Mm.
better players in London, he said, "Oh, I just really like to play with Exaction Squad into both Commandos and Felgor." And that's an unusual thing to say, that like considering that both these teams are quite strong, and you're looking at Exaction, who, as we put it right now, that they will like end up in probably the bottom half somewhere. So yeah, there's that. But all things considered, I think that they still lack like a long range threat outside of that sniper rifle. And what I love about Exaction Squad is that um, when you play with those shield guys, you can safely assume that your opponent will be scared to charge you, but because they might not kill you. What I hate about the Exaction Squad is that you cannot really assume that you're gonna kill your opponent's operative with a shield guy,
Yeah.
because it's a bit of a lottery. So yeah, there's that.
And it's a way of describing it in the past is they're complete wild cards. And so I guess my issue with them is I found this when I went to LVO, is I played Felgor and I managed to do really well in the first two turning points. I think I went 4-1 and then 4-2 against my Felgor opponent. And then just on turning point 3, every charge, like it was just that wild card didn't come up. And every time I fought, I lost all of my guys. And so I think he made like 7 charges, killed 7 dudes on turning point 3, and it was one of those things where you just go, oh well, I guess there's nothing you can do. It is a dice game at that point because it's all on 4s. You can get a reroll, but it's still not that reliable. And particularly with the brutal guys, you need the crits and that sort of stuff. So I guess for me, what the team needs, in my opinion, is probably like a 2-inch combat support bubble. Because they're supposed to work in pairs. It's thematic that cops work together. And therefore, if friendlies are in 2 inches of them, they could get a combat support. Because then they're having to play around the risk of blast versus the benefit of melee and that sort of thing. Right? It just makes it a bit more interesting for them. And it also works with their phospholumens, so it becomes thematic. They want to stick close to each other and do buddy cop stuff. And that might be a way around it. But
or just give them a team-wide 2 inches engagement range and see the community cry.
Maybe not that. Maybe not that, because that would be too strong.
I want to stay outside of combat. No,
you're always in combat, and everyone has manacles.
By the way, I can shoot into combat.
Yeah. So I think that's why, like for me, I think that would be friendlies within 2 inches count as adding combat support bonus. I think would be useful. Maybe there's some sort of rules exploit I haven't thought about why it would completely break the team, but it would be a way.
And by the way, to all the listeners, that was a joke. Like I'm here to do a jester of some sort. So yeah,
we don't actually want them to have a 2-inch engagement range, please. God no. All right, so I'm happy to sit there. It's interesting. I would say that I think maybe Void Dancers sit above them for most matchups, because I do think they have some bad ones still, but I'm happy for them to be in B-, and we can finesse.
Yeah, we can shuffle that around later on, or like just feel free to just bump Void Dancers over. After all, it's your podcast.
We'll see what happens, and we'll see what moves around. All right, so let's go on to a team that is, I guess, one of your favourites actually, and they did receive some love, and I think it's probably going to be one that maybe people are tracking a little bit less, but I think are pretty good right now. Let's talk about the Hearthkin Salvages. Where do you think they sit?
So I think, So thanks for helping with that.
I just threw them straight in.
Yeah. I think this is more or less where they should sit. I think the buff was really beneficial, and in a way, I see even before the buff, I somehow managed to take them to an event without too many expectations and went 4-0, and it was like, yeah, it felt great. And then I saw, oh, we got a buff. Oh, we got another one. And like, all things considered, looking at this team, I think that most players underestimate the power of the locator buff. That model, the either of the abilities that he has right now would put them into the 10 models that you're bringing to the game, just because of that ability. And now he has 2 of them, and at least for me, this operative has now become one of the must-haves or must-takes in almost every single game. And between the option to put a fringe bubble of no obscurity, and the fact that you just have an absolute authority against Shush or Into the Breach or Drawn to the Harm TP1, just because this is extremely powerful. And on top of that, you say, oh, you cannot do recon dash in scouting, which often puts the opponent off taking recon, so number 3 option in the scouting phase, which allows you to make a better prediction of what they will take, and then force them to start turning point 1. So like on so many levels, that operative is better than it used to be. I think this was a huge buff, and overall team the team got like a lot of, and yeah, I like them a lot quite these days.
And I think you touched on it there. Like that locator buff, it is like if you ask people what's one of the strongest things that Inquisition can do, it's I can turn off your your pre-game movement against Vet Guard or something like that. And
For
there's
a
a guy
command
here
point,
that
and this
costs
guy
no,
does that for free.
it doesn't cost them anything. He's like it is an absolute auto include. He is so good for that. And the additional now ability to get long range ignore obscuring for those other guns that they have on the team is fantastic. So I guess the one downside of this team is they're a shooting team that like specializes in close range shooting, but they're not that fast. So like,
You
that's a weird
definitely
thing.
deserve a plasma knife into your knee for that statement.
There's gonna be some grudges held against me. But like,
I'll
put
5 of them on your spaceship.
So yeah, 4's balanced isn't the most reliable profile, but it's fine, right? Like, but when they get close to you, they punch hard, right? And that's I guess the interesting thing with this team is how quickly they can punch up, particularly like the grenade dude when he's hitting on 2s, like turning normals into crits and all that sort of crazy stuff. So I completely agree with you. I think they're probably top of A tier, or near the top if nothing else, because
yeah, I
they're
probably
really
have
good
like
right now.
1 or 2 teams that will sit above them, like that.
Yeah.
At least like when I think about that, but I would keep them in the A tier, and I think they're extremely powerful right now. And yeah, on one hand you say, oh yeah, 4-up ballistic skill is not that powerful. On the other hand, if you combine that with proximate firepower, if you plan correctly with your attack token and grudge tokens, then all of a sudden it just stacks up. And
Yeah.
even
Yeah, for sure.
like the base gunner with the rotor cannon, 6 dice hitting on 4s with ceaseless. If you add balance from the attack token and the grudge token on top of that, you have really good chances of actually taking an operative out of the board.
Certainly, people die very, very quickly. Agreed. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think it's
Yeah.
too much
Shall we
more
go to
say
the
on
next
that team.
one?
Yeah, let's do next team. So, do you have a preference on what we do next? If not, I've got a suggestion.
Yeah, I'm curious to hear your opinion about Blooded.
Okay. Yeah. I think Blooded are in a great place. I think they are better than I think what a lot of people probably think they are. And I think they. So there's a few bits here with them, right? So they're a pretty effective melee team. They have a lot of bodies. They have a lot of activations. They have access to some APT weapons. Seek and Destroy now is far better than it used to be. Their attack ops, faction attack ops, are unfortunately garbage, but luckily the other ones, Seek and Destroy, are much better.
Well, arguably, you don't need tac ops, like faction tac ops, if you have Seek and Destroy.
Yeah, agreed. Because particularly for a melee team, because Rob and Ransack route is so accessible to you.
Yeah. I think they should plug that hole in B+ that we have right now.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think they are, and they might sneak higher. I think this is like between Illicidian and Blooded. I don't think the gap's much at all. And maybe into the broader field, Blooded might be better, particularly into who's around the corner right now. Like, and we'll talk about some of the big nasties that are in the meta. And I think Blooded can do quite well into them. But I agree. I think they're definitely up there in B+ or A. But they are a pretty solid team right now, I think.
Yeah, they might struggle on Beta Decima a bit if this is what you're playing on, and this has to be considered. Like looking back at that event that we had at Dark Sphere last month, where we play only Beta Decima, and then I would say like probably don't consider Blooded for that one if you really want to win the event. But otherwise, they're decent and open. They're quite good on Into the Dark. They have high threat saturation. I think B+, maybe even A. This is where they should sit.
And I think so. Interestingly, I've just been designing new Beta Decima maps because I think the community feedback is broadly that they're less fun to play on than the other board types. and I'm wondering if just by moving where the objectives are and that sort of stuff, but keeping the terrain rules if it's salvageable, to get people playing it more and enjoying it. And in that case, if you were to look at like a TPT version of Beta Decima, I think they'll do really well. So it's an interesting one. I think they are probably we'll leave them there for now, top of B plus. But yeah, I could see them slipping into A based on what else could be available. But that's probably a good place for them to sit.
Okay. So I have a question for you, Ryan.
Yeah.
What is another team that deserves to be in the bottom four?
In the bottom four,
Yeah.
I'm going to get a lot of hate for saying it.
Let's keep those comments coming.
But this is just my opinion, and I know that like some metas are better than others and are different than others, and people play differently. But it is my honest opinion that Kroot still sit bottom of the meta. And I think they're probably better than Hand of the Archon. Is that a true statement? Yeah, I think they're better than Hand of the Archon. But I don't think they're...
You really want those negative comments.
Yeah, like everyone is angry right now. All the Jakari players hate me. The Kroot players hate me. It's not personal. I want the Kroot to have buffs, guys. This is what I'm trying to say. But maybe there's people who are playing against.
Would you say that the GA1 on the Hounds is a buff or a nerf, or like a side buff or side nerf?
So my opinion on it is it's a side grade that has, I think, spec'd them more into their playstyle than they were before, which is not helpful. So this is a team that just wants to go, can I max all my VP in the first 2 turning points and then just try and deny you some? Like, that's it. Like, that's their whole game plan is, can I just get like as much VP as I can, turning point 1 and 2, and hope that you don't get one. Like, you drop a primary somewhere.
Yeah, but the problem with them is that they do that, and they do that pretty consistently, and then they die. And,
they do.
And then your opponent not only catches up on their points and their plan for the mission, but if your plan is to go 4-2, 4-2, you cannot go 1-4, 0-4 in the next 2 turning points, because ultimately they will win.
Yeah.
So this is I think this is the biggest problem with Kroot. I agree with you that they should sit within the bottom bracket, top 4 or bottom 4, I should say, teams in the game. And yeah, I just simply don't like the way those rules changes or like side grades push them even more into their playstyle, and yeah, this doesn't address the issue. It just pushes them further down the same path, and it's not really working, I'd say.
I would have liked it to have been an optional GAT, or you bound it so that they can be activated with another model within 3 inches of them. I think that would be a really interesting change for the team, because the Hounds are good, but now you're using them to go to 12 activations to better position turning point 1, but then turning point 2 and 3, you're a bit lackluster. You know, there isn't really much, like, there's not much double kill potential, so there's a high chance that you just die, as you said. And
Yeah.
I think you're playing like this weird game where you're just trying to hold on as long as you can. And so I think they're sitting at C tier until they get maybe a bit more killing potential, which I know they have got some more attacks on their melee guys, but you're still only 8 wounds in melee, so you're still pretty fragile against anyone who fights first, anyone who reduces your weapon skill, ballistic skill, and anyone who has like a just a scratch or anything like that. They're going to mess you up. So I think top of C for now is probably where they sit. Should we try and fill the gap with an S tier team then?
The gap with an S tier team. Okay, I'll have a suggestion for the S tier. And it's probably gonna come as an obvious one, and I'm gonna say the goats, the nasty animals of this game. Yeah, I think Felgor should sit in the S tier. I think as much as the war paint nerf was definitely a significant one, I I think that the other nerf that they got, the gong not working on frenzy, I think this should be spread across all the operative specific abilities that they have. Like when they're angry, they should just be angry and not be able to do anything else. I think the biggest problem with them is that they still have 10 wounds, decent melee, and live twice.
Yeah,
And yeah, and for many teams this is just too much. And sometimes this game is all about the numbers that you can bring to the table, and if you can win so many games that come down to attrition war just because you live twice, this is still powerful. And in a way there's certain similarities between them and commandos. I'm not talking only about the 10 wounds. It's about the survivability and the fact that they can withstand so much. Both teams do that in a slightly different way, but this is ultimately what makes them so special. What do you think about that?
I agree, and I was trying to figure out like how do you solve this team, right? Like how do you make them um, slightly more balanced in the wider meta, because you don't want to hit them too hard, but equally I think their core mechanics is really difficult to play around, because action efficiency in this game is difficult enough as is, and particularly if you're fighting like another 2 APL team, they simply don't have the output or the double fight potential, double sheet potential to secure the kills. And so you just have goats that are just hanging around, and albeit now they are less contesting for objectives, that they still contest objectives. Um,
Yeah, I think they shouldn't. I think this was an unnecessary buff that they received in the previous balance patch. I think they should still be like they should still count as 0 APL while frenzied.
yeah, I think so. I have two suggestions where I think people, and I'd be interested to know what the community's thoughts are on this. So the first one I think is the simplest. I think they are just too action efficient and they have too many bodies. So dropping them down to 9 bodies, I think would make it interesting, because now the Felgor player has an interesting choice in which operatives they take. What people do you want to have on your roster, and how are they going to sort of operate? Um, and maybe you drop someone, or you might mix up your play style for different matchups or whatever. The other option is there a way that you only get frenzied if you're on engage or something like that? So if you're on conceal, you don't frenzy, you just die. Because I feel like a lot of teams can invest a lot into trying to kill a goat that's on conceal. They don't die, and then suddenly it's all over. And when they have the double retains for being in cover and for having already activated, they are so
Yeah,
durable.
yeah,
They're
yeah.
so
It's yeah.
durable.
Ultimately it's about the durability, the survivability that they have, and yeah, I agree with that. That with some approach that would reduce that in one aspect or the other, you could consider uh, giving them less wounds, taking away the operative. You could consider allowing the opponent to keep bashing them in melee when they put them on frenzy in their own activation,
Mm,
as in like you charge them and let's say you have a melee killing monster, and you just keep bashing them into the ground until they're not frenzied anymore. So we could consider that as well. But as of now, at the very minimum, I'd say if you're frenzied, you're not controlling objectives. Maybe not even scoring tac ops, but then like that might be a step too far, because it would still make sense for them to score like seek and destroy like while frenzied.
yeah, absolutely. I think that's why, like, I think the easiest, and this is like when you look at balance changes, it's like what's the most simple thing you could do to have like the most effect and try and solve a problem. I genuinely think reducing them to 9 is the way forward, because against other mid-range teams, like always like having the same number of activations as say novitiates, like I don't really know what novitiates do. Like, or well, I know novitiates have the ability to have access to crits and that sort of stuff, but like for a lot of those teams, like let's say Kazakin, whatever, you kill one, but you're now either exposed or you haven't actually killed them, and now it's an initiative gamble. Do they win initiative? Do they not? Because the goat's still there, and then if they do, what your first activation is just killing the goat that you killed last turn. Like, is that an effective use of your your initiative gamble, and bear in mind there's probably now 4 goats that are within threat range of various things. So
Yeah, and on one hand, you don't want to do that because you already killed them, and oh yeah, if they activate that model, it will die by the end of its activation. On the other hand, you often have to, because if you don't, before they die, they will take an operative with them. So it's like, it's very often it puts you, killing a goat puts you in a bad spot because you invested some resource into killing that goat. You might have exposed another operative while doing so, and now you have to kill it again, potentially exposing another operative to be killed by another goat. It's just like it just doesn't work the way it should work. So yeah, but yeah, all things
and
considered, I think they should sit in S tier.
yeah, I was about to say, because they can also then just yeet goats into the guys that have moved forwards, sit on the objectives, and just bung you up, right? Like the best goat players know when to fight and when not to fight, and I think that's the thing that is the skill differential between Felgor players is knowing exactly when you want to just hide in melee and not try and roll any dice, and when you need to go, actually, I want to kill this guy right now, and
Yeah,
that's
because
that's the main thing.
yeah, I think it's a really good point because on one hand, we know that they're very capable in melee, meaning that you can be aggressive with them if you have to or if you want to, but at the same time, the durability and survivability allows them to play a really good defensive game. Like playing as ghosts, if you manage to establish the positioning on the board, you don't really have to launch your rockets into your opponent. By rockets, I mean operatives, and allow them to potentially outplay you with multiple activations, killing those goats one by one. You can often play on defensive counterplay game because you know that your opponent will find it really hard to actually push into your models because they live twice.
Yeah, exactly that. All right, let's press on to the next team. What team do you want to cover next?
Yeah, I think I'd like to cover the team that I managed to purchase after 2.5 years into the game, and I managed to glue them all together, all 19 of them, and undercode them, and then they got nerfed. I'm talking about Third Guard. So yeah, I'm really pleased to look at my veteran guardsmen, waiting for probably next edition until I paint
They've had a
them.
fall from grace. Yeah, they've had a fall from
Yeah,
grace.
but I'd say it was long coming, so I
Yeah,
can only blame myself. And I would put them in maybe B plus for now, because I think they're still strong. I think they still have plenty of tools, and we can't underestimate 14 bodies with 12 activations, with in-depth atonement. Yes, they're minus once per game. Yes, the sniper spotter combo doesn't work as it used to, but they still have plenty of AP weapons, plenty of activations, and they should play the mission really well. So I think this is where they should sit, and I'm glad that you put them lower than Blooded, because I
yeah,
think this is where they should be right now.
yeah. So I think they sit at the sort of the bottom of B plus because I think you touched on all of it there, right? I think they still have a lot of good tools. They're still 14 bodies. They still have Into the Breach. The demo mine going to once a game, I think, was actually on most top tables like not a change because like if a demo mine's getting 2 mines off, like it's gone
Yeah,
terribly.
that GG.
Like,
That's
like
yeah, like if someone like blasts you more than once with that mine, I mean, I would admire a player who takes more than one mine to the face and still manages to win against bad
yeah, yeah,
guys,
yeah,
despite all of the other tools that they have. So yeah, so I'd
yeah,
say it's a well thought nerve, long time coming, and it definitely puts them down a bit because like before the nerf, I would say they were uh, amongst the very top and the very best teams in the game.
yeah.
And
Agreed.
before the balance patch, I would say definitely an S tier, maybe not top of the S tier, but definitely S tier. These days, I'd say B plus. Still a very good team. Still, when piloted by a good player, they play mission very well. It's just that they may not find it as easy to face the top of the field these days as they used to.
Yeah, concur. And yeah, I think they're the teams that they are now used to be really good against things like Hearthkin actually. Now the fact that it shuts down into the breach is just a math. Like it just completely
Oh
changes how
yeah.
that game plays. Like
Like,
loot for Hearthkin against them originally is like a 4-2 start, and now it's like, oh hey, like I don't know, man, like you might struggle to get 3 points on loot as Vet Guard, which is mental. That's absolutely mental from a change in pace. So
well, you can still take the +1 movement across the team, right? So on certain maps,
true,
you'll still
yeah,
be
true,
able to reach those mid-board objectives, but that means that you didn't take ceaseless or on your guns, and may mean that you will not be as well positioned as you'd like to be. So there are certain downsides coming along with it, and yeah, and this should actually introduce an interesting dynamic into the game in this particular matchup, or like actually for Halfkin versus teams like Commandos or like Vedguard, where you block the shush or into the breach turning point one, but you can still you need to consider that as a Halfkin player that they may use that turning point two to
yeah,
all of the sudden gain an advantage. You can't forget is like, okay, I did counter that turning point one, and all of a sudden, yes, I'm safe, because even Vedguard players, they can still do a turning point two. They just need to start in the drop zone. So yeah, but yeah, all things considered, I'd agree. It's going to be a much more demanding game from a Vedguard player, and yeah, another reason why they will be slightly lower on the tier list than they used to be.
yeah, agreed. I think a team that might sit comfortably in B tier, but I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. I think they're going to sit above Warp Coven, but I actually think Hunter Clade are there at the moment.
Oh, we
But
have a first big disagreement,
okay,
like a
interesting.
massive one.
Okay, so I think Hunter Clade are uh, kind of middle of the pack. I think they've got some pretty good matchups in most areas, and arguably potentially into some of the top teams right now in the current meta. They're going to be pretty good. But I guess I don't know. I've not seen them perform too well recently. So why do you think that they should be hitting up a little bit higher than where they are right now?
So I think that, like, first things first, Hunter Clade. I see Hunter Clade as a team that's too fair in a way. They
Mm,
have massive bases, meaning that you cannot stack too many models in certain spots where you'd like them to be. They haven't got a grenade, which is a huge pain in the back if you run them, and they rely on the efficiency in both melee and shooting. They can do both quite well. However, they haven't got any tricks. They have like 11 activations, and the best trick you can do is they give +1 APL to your gunner, and then GA to the guy that removes obscurity and the gunner, and just shoot something with that. And that's the biggest trick, because like the GA2 with the leader and the rush stalkers turning point two is, at least from my perspective, is way too telegraphed. The reason
yeah,
why I think they should be slightly higher, slightly higher, I would even put them in A tier in the tier list, and I'm looking forward to hear feedback around that, is because I think they do quite well specifically into the teams that you see as the top of the meta.
yeah,
Maybe aside of Pathfinders, I think they do well into goats, because you can tell the goat player you're injured and you have no rerolls. Good luck killing me now. They do quite well into commandos these days, because they have very reliable shooting. You just take all infiltrators. You don't try to charge them and bash them into pieces. You shoot them and wait for them to charge you, and then finish them off with your 5-up lethal 5-up on the power weapon. And I think they do well into elites, and I think they still will do quite well into the new Nightmare Elite team joining the fray. And yeah, all things considered, for that reason, the fact that they do quite well into the teams in the top of the field, I think they should be higher up. But yeah.
Okay, yeah, I definitely see your reasoning. And I guess the only things that I've got really to counter is, um, I completely agree. So their one method or means of double killing really is the leader GA2 ability. I know they can give a third APL to either their leader or to, say, an infiltrator, and they can charge, fight, and shoot someone. Um, but that doesn't really get you a double kill most of the time. So I think what I found whenever I played them was they lacked like um a decisive move, if that made sense. Like if
I,
your opponent can see
I
where
had
your
an
leader
impression you
is,
wanted to say they lack that oomph that that
yeah, that's it, right?
you just haven't got any play that will be like, okay, that's it.
Yeah,
Now I did my thing, and now you can't win this game. No, they haven't got anything of that sort. All the while, the opponents might have such a thing against them. So yeah, I can see that. And frankly, even though I think they should sit higher up in the tier list, this is actually the team I've got the worst win rate at tournaments with. So
and this is kind of like one of my points is that whenever I see people playing them, they never seem to really pop off. Like I'm not quite sure what it is. Like I know that they've simplified their reliability mechanics now, so it is better. Um, but I guess like they're an 11 model team. I know you can drop to 10 if you want to run um, more
yeah, you
rust
probably
stalkers.
go 7-4 into hordes and mid ranges, and 5-5 into elites.
Yeah, I think that's the way to run them. Um, but I just found that they don't do too well. I mean, like, and I guess the example would be, if you're against an experienced player and you're running against like Blooded or anything like that, um, the chance of you getting double kills with those rust stalkers, which is what you need to achieve, is really difficult when you're probably having to take terrain modification into effect. Because sure, you can ignore the first barricade, but you're not ignoring the barricade that they're using. And like on ITD, I found that they can be quite easily screened out, and that sort of stuff. But I'll accept that they are far better into the top of the meta. So I think we push them up. Do you think that they sit
Let's
in
maybe B plus for now,
B
and
plus,
just
and what, like
yeah,
above Vetgar, below Blooded?
yeah, let's
Fair.
agree on that. I think this, yeah, I would probably risk putting them a bit high, but maybe for the reason that if I expect to win, or if I want to win an event, and let's say it's 4 rounds, then I have to assume that round 4 I'm playing against one of the juggernauts, running one of the juggernaut teams, and one
Yep.
of those teams will be a team like goats, like commandos, and this is where I want to be. Haha! I have my hunter clade, and all of a sudden I do have a good matchup in my round 4. However, I
Yeah,
can
very
see
true.
that you still have to win the first 3 rounds to get there.
You have to get there, right? You have to get there.
So that might be an issue, but yeah. So let's put them B plus and see where they end up when we get to the very end of the tier list, I'd say.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. All right. What's the next team that you want to cover off?
Yeah, so I'd like to uh, cover off one of the teams that for a very long time was considered as one of the better or one of the best teams. Maybe not recently, but last year. And I personally never had too much of a respect towards that team. I never liked them. I never thought that they were like super broken or extremely powerful. So yeah, I just want to keep those hate comments coming into the comment section on YouTube, and that's Breaches.
Oh,
I
okay.
think,
Yeah.
yeah, like I think they're extremely slow, extremely predictable. They have like one comms, and yes, they do have the fancy GA2 shenanigans with the double activate and +1 APL and so many auto retains that you will kill like almost every operative in the game with that. But once they do that, they're done. They're like, this is okay. After that, they just, okay, I'm just gonna move 6 and shoot you with my shotgun with some rerolls, and that's it. I don't regard them as a great team. Quite the opposite. I think they're quite a bad team.
Ooh.
But they do still have quite a few activations. They're quite durable, and for that reason, I would probably put them either at the very bottom of B plus or in B.
Ooh, okay, that is a hot take. Because I have a lot of experience with breaches, and I still think that they have a lot of play. It was interesting. We were having a chat the other day in some of the WhatsApp groups about how Vox Scream interacts with GA2, and I don't think it cancels it raw. So you can activate a dude, they Vox Scream you. You then use Breach and Clear on the guy next to him and activate him anyway, and it gets around it. But anyway, there's like a little niche thing that's just popped up.
But yeah, they will probably still kill the elite players in a way. But I just
Well,
think like if you put them against other teams within that mid-range ish area, I
yeah,
think they won't do as well as many people think they will. Like I played many times against Dan running breaches,
yeah.
and Dan is definitely a good player, and he won many events with them. But I think it's thanks to his wonderful abilities and not the team specifically.
Yeah, so I think the issues that they do have, and this is something that I will admit, is I actually think elites are a bad matchup for this team. Like you have a
Oh,
melter gun and you have a plasma gun, and if those two things don't kill, you probably bounce. And I know that people will tell me you have the axe jack and the hatch cutter, and I get that. However, like statistically, those models don't kill most good elites in melee. Like if you're fighting elite gunners, sure, but like you try and fight the that -1 attack dice or like -1 weapon skill guy that's going to be coming out from the the new team, and I think you're absolutely screwed. I agree with you on their speed. But I do like their GA2 abilities. I do like their ability to play the objective with like lock it down, and I do like their durability from when it comes to -1 damage. So I personally think with the changes to Vet Guard, I think they're better than Vet Guard.
mm-hmm.
I think the cat is massively underutilized when it comes to an ability to score an early kill on turning point one. I don't really know why people don't like it that much. But I think it plays massive mind games with people, and it's very good for area denial. So if you're playing against a 10 activation team, it's, for me, I think fantastic. And it gives you much more range with their comms, because you identified a point there, which I think is a massive weakness of this team, is the comms is short ranged, but that lets you have effectively 2 bubbles of it, which is far more useful. So you're quite high on the rating of Hunterclade. So I'll say that they'll probably sit just below Hunterclade and just above Vet Guard.
Okay. Yeah.
I think they might be. I personally think I would rate them more than Hunterclade, but you probably would rate Hunterclade more than them. So I think they sit somewhere in amongst that. But
Yeah. Let's keep it at that. Like I'm sure that I will. I just triggered a crusade of Navy breaches players against any of my teams specifically, and there will be a crusade of players proving to me that I'm wrong and that they will keep losing it against breaches. But yeah, yes, they are durable. Yes, they do have the GA tricks, and what's very good about those GA tricks is that you have that certainty, or you get as close to certainty as you can playing this game, which is
yeah,
great. But what I don't like about them is their mobility or lack thereof, and therefore on many maps a lack of a potential to threaten the mid-board objectives, turning point one. And sometimes it's all about that. You need to establish board control early and just stick to it. And
yeah, for sure. And like for instance, on Beta Decima, I think they're going to suck. Like
oh
on the,
yeah,
on the current Beta Decima, I don't really see what they can do. They don't have the movement potential to reach the objective. So you're probably scoring like 1 point on turn one, which is almost a completely irrecoverable position.
yeah.
I think for most
All they
teams.
need is a guy with a jump pack a guy that prevents the opponents from moving before turning point 1 firefight phase,
Yeah.
and and a
And just
few other
turn them
things.
into
And
dwarves, and then they're
yeah, yeah,
fine.
yeah, they
Alrighty.
are dwarves, but ugly.
Should we talk about a team that I think is actually pretty good on Beta Decima? And I think they're one of the strongest teams in the game. You probably already know who I'm talking about, but I have been playing them recently. So let's talk about Pathfinders, because I think they are top of the meta right now. Not better than Felgor, but I do think they're better than Commandos. I think 12 activations is, with the recon drone, as the recon drone is probably too strong.
Yeah, I can see that, and it's interesting that the forward deploy rules as written, I think it doesn't work on doesn't affect the drone
For
forward
ITD.
deploy.
Yeah, for ITD, because it's not a and for Beta Decima, because it's
Yeah, exactly.
It's not a CP, it's not a tac ploy, it's an ability on a data card. So
Yeah,
you're
so
unaffected by the ITD nerfs, you're unaffected by the Beta Decima nerfs.
and that's quite huge, considering that forward deploys in both those killer zones are like massively important, and can benefit you to gain that early game advantage, and turn that into maybe not easy victory, but at least put you in a position to get that victory quite easier. So there's that, and I think that with number of activations they've got, I don't think that the fat drone is a fair solution. That it comes in as one operative or one choice on the roster. I think that if you compare that fat drone against any other Pathfinder operative, it doesn't seem too fair, considering what each of them does. So yeah.
I think if you asked anyone in the game, like any team, would you take the recon drone and switch it out for one of your models? They probably would. Like, it's GA2, like it has the access to give you Relentless where you need it. It has Fly. It has 12 wounds and a 4-up save. It is like one of the best models in the game. As it stays at the moment, I think either they need to tweak the rules on it, and either sacrifice the GA2 but keep Relentless, or keep GA2 but make it like Ceaseless or something like that. Because at the moment, or make it so it costs two operatives again. But like at the moment, I agree with you. The efficiency and the economy, like the money worth of that drone right now is insane. It does so much for the team.
Yeah, and have you seen the model? That gun surely should have been unwieldy on top of heavy.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, but if you try to work out the balance, like how much effort does the drone controller have to put into controlling that drone to balance it out while it flies or shoots? Like, this is way too much. It should be unwieldy.
And it's got a Monka dash, so he's doing like a dash. He's firing his burst cannon, and then he's GA2ing a iron rifle into someone else or whatever. And it's just it's a lot. And I think I'd be okay with it if it gave less of a GA2 buff, or if it keeps Relentless, then it can't be the next activation. Remove the GA2 from it, because it lets you do some wacky things on ITD, where you can burst into rooms and get quite a lot of like early damage, and that's probably not where they want to be. And by the way, I don't think Pathfinders are bad in ITD anymore. I think that's
neither do I.
Yeah, like I think so. For people who haven't experienced what I think Pathfinders can do on ITD now, you can effectively marker-light someone. You can then go on get on guard, and you marker-light them again. And that means that effectively for you, a single activation, because the second part of it is during your opponent's activation, you can apply 4 marker-light tokens.
With the high intensity marker-light with one model. That's absolutely huge, because if you're not a dwarf and you can't make your barricade heavy, that means that your barricades don't do much into Pathfinders on ITD.
Absolutely nothing. Yeah, that's useless. Yeah. And all of the objectives are basically protected only by light terrain, and therefore they can just either have high intensity marker lights everywhere, marker light you up, and then just shoot you out. And one of the things that people will see that I played a lot of is I was routinely dropping the gunners, because the standard Shazla with his Markerite and Pulse Carbine is so efficient that like actually the rail rifle is often overkill, which is nuts to me. Like it is
Yeah.
nuts that you don't need to take the special weapons because the normal guns will kill stuff. Um,
Imagine a situation like you're like, let's go back 2 years back in time, and you see a mysterious guy come into the nerd game shop where you play your game with Pathfinders, and he tells you, "Mark my words, open will be the worst kill zone for Pathfinders."
it's
And
bizarre,
you'll
right?
be
It's
like,
bizarre.
"Who is this nutter?" Like, yeah,
Yeah.
but yeah, like jokes aside, I think they should sit in S tier. I think they're a very powerful shooty horde. The fat drone should be reworked because as of now it's not fair. And yeah, that they should do quite well into many other teams, especially on ITD and BD. Uh, Open might be a different story because that will very much depend on the terrain layout, and
Yeah.
if you can hide behind heavy, if they can alpha strike you, because that may change a lot. Like if they can, if you have bad terrain layout and they can take out or threaten to take out a few of your operatives in the first activation, that in itself can turn the matchup upside down. So it's much harder to evaluate them on open, but I think they're quite safe on BD, they're quite safe on ITD, and overall they're quite good, and they should do fairly well into most teams. So yeah, I agree. S tier is their place, but they have ugly models. Oh my god.
That is going to get you a lot of hate. That is you're looking for trouble right now.
Well, I'm here to increase the. To all the listeners, my sole purpose of joining Ryan today is to at least double the amount of comments. At least double the amount of comments. So yeah,
Please
here
make it
we are.
positive, guys. Please make it positive. I'm sure your Pathfinders look great. It's other Pathfinders that Bart doesn't like. All right, so what should we talk about next? We got quite a few teams still to go through. Wow, there's a lot of teams to go through,
Yeah,
isn't there?
maybe you'd like to diss my pet team and yeah, talk about nuns with guns.
Nuns with guns. Yeah. You know what? I don't think they're bad, right? I think they're better than I think a lot of people give them credit for. I think they've done well in the sort of the meta of what's come out top recently. But they have such a weird skew matchup between like ITD and Open that they play as completely different teams, which I think for a lot of players is very difficult, because you do have to completely change your mindset going into them. I think they are. I'd probably sit them in like B plus somewhere. I'm trying to think where they would sit, because what I love about the nuns is their reliability, and that like as a good player you can broadly just go, I'm going to make this thing happen, and it does. Which there is a certain quality to be assigned to that when it comes to competitive play, of just being able to just make stuff happen when you need it. And particularly for me, it's, I don't know why this is, but it's the charging into melee and just needing a single hit to kill something. I don't know why that for me always means I fail, but like that's where they just go, no, don't worry about it, faith points, done. So I think probably for me they're going to sit in B plus, and I want to put them above Hunterclade but below Blooded. But where do you think they sit?
Oh, okay, so first things first, you just got a grudge token, and I'm on frenzy,
I
and
didn't
yeah,
say
and
S
I'm
tier.
and I am writing at least half of those negative comments coming up. No, but jokes aside, I seriously think that that they are a bit stronger than most people give them credit for, and it may be because I'm biased, because I obviously play an absolute ton of games with them, and I have a very decent win rate with the team. And yeah, I would agree that novitiates are a very different team depending on whether you look at ITD plus open or fully mixed.
Mm.
They do play in a very specific way on Beta Decima as well. I haven't had a chance to play with them on Beta Decima since the balanced slate, because I picked up dwarfs, and this is my new toy right now. But all things considered, they will, or their power level will differ depending on the format of the tournament. If someone tells me that, oh, we're playing ITD only, like last year at LGT, oh, they're a very strong team.
For sure. Yeah, I agree with that.
Like ridiculously strong. This is like, if you're talking ITD only and not put them in S tier, I will doubt your perception of that team massively. But when it comes to overall grade, I would say they lose quite a bit on open. They lose some of their capabilities on Bet Decima, although we need to remember that the penitent with +1 APL and +2 inch movement and auto passing jump tests can actually get quite far into the board.
Yeah, very true.
I know many people give it a crack grenade. I personally, and this is my hot take, I often don't do that. I often prefer to put the crack grenade on my medic to add another threat on the board. And this is how I like to play with nuns. But yeah, like just to go away from my digression, I think they do fairly well into elites. I think they've always struggled into certain hordes, just because of the attrition game and the fact that sometimes hordes can just kill them too quickly and end up with more models. I would probably put them, let's put them in B plus somewhere. I would probably put them above Blooded, maybe just below Blooded. Yeah. And this is because I know I'm biased, because if it was just my tier list, they would definitely be an A. But at the same time, I need to account for the fact that I'm a freak. I play too many games with them, and I may see power that is not there in that team. So for that reason, I'm happy to put them in B plus.
I'm gonna have to put Blood above them. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Feel free to do that.
And so the difference between Novitiates and Hunterclade is they definitely have the oomph, right? Like, they have so many ways to like, if you don't see it coming with like the leader GA2 or the burning advanced torrent, or the 3 APL potential charge crack grenade, whatever it is, right? That they have so many ways to pop off a double kill. I can make a really decisive move. We
could spend hours talking about the cool tricks they can do. In ITD, you can dash them in scouting, dash the flamer in scouting, give them +1 APL, and then open the door and burning advanced dash and get under the point and either kill someone who's already there or just go on guard. On an objective, let them come to you. On an objective that your opponent thinks is their objective. You can do like the GA2 activations with the leader, and we need to remember that somehow, some way, novitiates are, I think, the exact team that got most of the buffs, not through the balanced data state, because this is where they got nerfed a bit, but through the FAQs.
Yes.
In the FAQs, they got the blinding aura got super conceal. In the FAQs, they got guard from Defenders of the Faith, and in the FAQs they clarify that if you use the lead by example ability of the leader, you can meet the threshold point of that ability that has to be met for it to trigger anytime during the activation. So in a way, most of the good stuff that came towards them came through the FAQ. So it's crazy. But yeah, let's not turn this into a chat about novitiate.
Novitiate deep dive next hour. Let's go.
Yeah. Because I could easily continue talking about novitiates. Let's talk about something else. And maybe after like having spoken now for quite some time, would you say it's good time to do some preliminary placing of one of the new teams?
Yeah, sure.
Maybe Mandrakes. What do you think about Mandrakes?
Oh, okay. I have lots of thoughts on Mandrakes. This is a team that they just seem to give everything to. Like they thank God that they're kind of fragile, but I mean they're always gonna have a form of vulnerable save. So um, that's fine. But I guess my problem with Mandrakes is, and this is why it's gonna be really hard to place them, is because their ability as a kill team is entirely dependent upon the board, right? Like if you have lots of heavy terrain, like so on TPT maps currently, I think Mandrakes are going to be fantastic. Like they're going to be so good, and like people are going to be there screaming at me that my maps are not competitive because Mandrakes are running wild, and there's nothing I can do about it. But like because all their abilities procs off heavy terrain. That being said,
Yeah.
I think that if there's not heavy terrain where they need to be, they're probably going to suck. Like, so it's like this weird combination of they're completely terrain dependent, and then I don't are they broken? I think they might be broken on certain maps and
Okay, so
layouts.
before we get to the discussion about whether they're broken or not, like I wanted to make a comment about what you just said, like
Yeah,
which is I think it's quite interesting because when we look at Novitiate, we said that the power level of that team depends on the kill zone and
yes, yeah,
and in the case of Mandrakes, it may be quite similar in a way that you want if you're on ITD, you can look at the maps and the shadow will be like within 1 inch of the pillars, so you have quite a lot of shadow on ITD. If you look at Beta Decima, most of the terrain pieces there are heavy, and in some of the ledges of the vantage points, they just overhang, so you can hide beneath them and be in shadow. And then you may play one of the open maps. And when I look at some maps from the Adepticon in the US, there
mm.
was a map that they referred to as the dreaded X, which was basically a shooting range, a frying pan with almost no terrain. If you happen to play your Mandrakes on that map, it's going to be where's my ability?
Where's my entire team faction's abilities?
Yeah,
They don't
yeah.
exist all of
Like,
a sudden.
why did
Yeah.
you nerf my team with a map?
Um, So there's a few abilities that I just want to touch on because I think I love the idea of the ability, right? But this is why I think it's probably too much. So
And we thought that the fly was broken.
yeah, well, because and genuinely the way I look at this, like this to me was like reading Pathfinders when they first came out. So I was like, holy, like this is some insane sets of abilities that probably shouldn't all be in the same kill team or as accessible as they all are. But the first one I want to talk about is their creeping horror ability. So for those of you who don't know, it's a strategic ploy. Strategic ploy costs 1 CP, and after each enemy operative's activation, so each time your enemy operative activates, but before the next one is activated, you can perform a free dash action. And each friend can only do this once, but you have to, and again, this is your point, you have to be on conceal and start in shadow and end in shadow. So that's like the saving grace of this ploy, right? Is it's terrain dependent, and I think now I can see why the playtesters were telling me that you need more light terrain or objectives, probably because they knew this was coming down the road. But I was like, no, that seems fine, not an issue. And then this team released, and I was like, oh my god. So. And the reason why I don't like this is because how it can stack with some crazy abilities they can do. They have ability to make their dashes longer, so they can recon dash to sit under a vantage point in, say, Octarius. They can then wait for you to do your Hyrotech laughs and Hyrotech Hearthkin laughs and Dwarven whatever. But for most teams, right? So they can do that straight at the start of the game. Then they just wait to see what you do, right? Like they wait to see where you move, and at some point they go, I'm now going to move my guy 4 inches forwards, and that can be, by the way, like after you finish doing all your stuff, so you've shot someone, then they move them 4 inches further forward. They're now 8 inches up the board before the operatives activates. They can charge or conceal and fight you. Like, that is wild, right? Like, absolutely insane that they have a effectively 16-inch charge range from their deployment. Like, if it's in shadow, and that's the point, right? Is like, I know that there's potentially gaps, and you might be able to find a way around it, whatever. But that is insane threat ranging. So just
and can you remind me, because like I don't know the rules by heart yet. This ability, do they trigger that ability after the activation or after each of the actions?
After the whole activation.
The whole activation. Okay,
so your enemy does their
what
thing.
They cannot do is, okay, the enemy activates, they make, okay, I'm gonna move. Okay, I'm gonna dash away from you.
That'd be even worse. Like, could you imagine that? Like, I'm gonna move here and shoot you. No, you're not. I'm going to go to the door.
Exactly.
So that's like one thing, and you go, all right, fine. That's a really strong ability, and we haven't seen that much reactive play in a team before, I don't think. But then, like, the fact that they can charge and conceal is a durability buff, and a lot of people won't necessarily see that as one. But like, if you're a shooting team and you can't get shots off easily, then that is a straight durability buff. Then they have the ability to auto retain a second dice if they're in shadow with a strategic ploy. So like, these things, like, when you stack them one after the other, they're all amazing. Like, they are all so good. Yeah. They can fight first, and this is why I think they're such a skew team, because like, I don't know what like Corsairs or Harlequins do against a team like this. Like,
so I would say they're definitely the new best elves.
Yeah,
and like what I said beforehand in form of a joke, like, oh, and you thought that fly was broken. I actually meant it, because like, people, oh no, Harlequins fly. Imagine a team that can teleport around the board.
Yeah.
And then they charge from conceal, then they have 4-up invuln, they have auto retains, and then you think, oh yeah, so at least I can charge them and kill them in melee. Oh no, they fight first. So your guy who wants to charge them and kill them in melee actually needs to be a powerhouse on his own to be able to withstand them fighting first. So you have to have a lot of wounds, or you need to have a similar ability to fight first, or whatnot. So they are very skewed, and you said, and on top of that, they can impact the order of activations, which I think is huge, and people underestimate how big that is, and how big of an impact that will have during the game. The ability of the leader, and the focus ability of the other guy, that will prevent you from activating the model that you might want to activate. All those things combined, I think this will make for a very strong team. However, I think that this team will prove to be difficult for new players, because if you don't know how to use those operatives that you have, you will end up dismantled by more experienced players very quickly. Because after all, if you don't know how to benefit or make all of those abilities work together, you have 8 wound operatives, and that's it. And that's not really great when it comes to the base stat line. The other thing that I have to say about them, they will be CP hungry.
Oh, for sure.
They will be CP hungry, because you read strategic ploys and tactical ploys. You read the first one, oh yeah, I will play that every turn. You read the second one, oh yeah, I will play that every turn. The third one, I will play that every turn. You get to the tac ploys, and your command points are long gone, and you just started reading your tac ploys, because and then you realize, oh yeah, I want to play these as well. So yeah, ultimately, I think they will be a difficult team to play for new players, especially. However, at the same time, they will be a team that will punish new players especially hard, because all of the threat ranges that they will have, like the 16 inches for the charge, or stuff that they could set up for turning point 2, because I know that if you do the shadow passage, you cannot shoot that turn, right? But you can still set up multiple threats and saturate the board with threats for turning point 2, And normally you would say, oh yeah, but if you do that, you might accidentally overextend because your opponent will be able to reach you as well if you do that. But then you can say, well, you have focus and you have your leader who is somehow likely to prevent your opponent to activate in the order they would like to activate, which might have a huge impact. So plays that would typically be considered as potential overextensions in other teams may not really be overextensions, but a slightly safer threat saturations for this team. So for that reason, I think they will be very powerful. Where do we put them then?
Knowing my maps, and this is like I'm ready for the hate if people hate my maps now. Knowing my maps and the fact that all of their ploys are good, all of their equipment's good, and they have some amazing option abilities.
Yeah, remember, guys, if you lose against Mandrakes, you can say it's all because of Ryan, and even if you play on ITD, just blame Ryan's maps.
I think that they're going to be either very, very top of A or bottom of S, and I'm more.
Yeah, I think top of A, maybe bottom of S. On one hand, I'm like reluctant to put too many teams in S tier. On the other hand, we have like 30-ish teams in the game.
There's going to be a few. I think putting them bottom of S is probably the safe place to be, because I think, for instance, if you look at the teams that are in S tier, Commandos, I think they are going to struggle to kill Commandos because they lack the melee damage, right? So like they'll bounce quite a lot, and that's fine for Commandos.
So that might be the reason why I actually would prefer to keep them on top of A, because as you said, Commandos, they will be very excited to see that elf charging them, and they will be like, whoa, just a scratch, and I'm gonna bash you into the ground.
Yeah.
And then if you look at goats, I think ultimately goats will just win by way of attrition, and like, oh yeah, I still have 10 wounds and I live twice. And then you look at Pathfinders, and Pathfinders, even considering the double retain and shadow and 4-up invuln, Pathfinders with so many models, good rerolls, and 4 base damage on their weapons can prove to have enough in the arsenal to just shoot them off the board.
Yeah. But these are all teams that we think are above them. So
fine. Let's keep them in bottom S and see what happens.
There's 2 teams that I think will come up, which I don't think they'll like playing against, but I think they could just outscore them. And that's like the bit that I think that this team can do is everyone knows how powerful the Grot was, right? Of just being able to contest an objective or steal an objective early on turning point 1. And this team can do that twice. And it requires nil investment from them. So, we'll see. Maybe they drop down based on where some other teams come up in a second. But we'll leave it there. But definitely somewhere between S and A. All right, so let's press on to a elite team close to my heart. Let's talk about the In-Session squad, because I think this is a team that has, again, just... I don't really know why that they had the nerfs that they had. I guess I do, but they were doing well in casual scenes, but I haven't seen them do too well outside of that, right? Like the best I've seen them do is like 3-1 recently. No one's winning tournaments, and that's because at some point they meet Hearthkin, they meet Kazakin, they meet like Legionary, the new elite team, whatever it is, and I just think that they lack the durability that they once had. And so I wonder if they have what it needs to hold in right now. But they do score well. So it's kind of a weird one for me. I think they sit in B-. I think they're above Exaction Squad and Void Dancers. But
I was worried that you would put them way higher, and as I was about to say to look at B+ tier and tell me which team out of those loses to Intercession.
Absolutely none of them. Yeah, that's the problem, right? Is like all the teams that are above them now, like even Warp Coven, they just beat them in melee. and they can now they can guarantee that they out-activate. The Soul Reaper cannon can pick up a kill if you want to go that way. If you want to be shooty, if you don't want to be shooty, you can just run loads of goats and probably not die, because your sorcerers are more of a problem for this team to deal with. And so yeah, I think they've had a fall from grace, and they might be worse than where they are right now, but I think B- is fair. They have some.
I
really
think B-
bad
is
matchups.
fair, and all things considered, and I'm gonna again work for those comments, and I'm gonna say it's for the better of the whole game, and the reason for that is that at some point I literally got bored seeing like half of the field being intercession. And like you go to the tournament and it's like, oh, another game against intercession. Like I think that I recall last year's Warhammer Fest when Serkan went there with Harlequins, and at the time he wasn't really fond of that matchup, and he ended up playing them 3 times. And I think you were one of them,
One of
by
them
the
was
way.
me. Yeah, sorry, Sergey. I think I was the only one he lost as well. But yeah, I mean that was quite a good matchup. Well, I think it's a weird one because a lot of Harlequin players do quite well into that matchup because you just take the upgraded damage kisses and away you go. But I do think that if you lean into shooting with intercession, you can solve that problem. So yeah, I think we're happy with where they sit. Should we talk about an elite team that we think is going to absolutely crush the meta, or is that much just my opinion? Do you have any thoughts on
You
Nemesis
mean
Claw?
you mean Strike Force Justin?
Yeah. We'll come on to them. I actually don't think they're quite as bad as everyone thinks, but let's talk about Nemesis Claw because they are exciting and people want to know about them.
I thought you would leave them for a
Right till
very
the end.
end, but
Okay.
yeah,
You
but
know what? Let's do that. Let's leave them to the end, and we'll do Strike Force Justin in the meantime because I have a interesting take on this, which is probably different to what other people will think. I actually think Strike Force Justin is better than Intercession, which for a lot of people are like, wait, what? I think they're harder to play than Intercession. Like I completely think that they're much more difficult to play. But actually, when you look at them into the meta of what you need to fight against, I think they have far better tools to deal with it. The captain with his invulnerable save and like insane CP generation is really good. His AP weapon is really good because it hits on twos. And he's just an absolute beef stick. And with a 40 mil base, a double fight is so much easier to pull off. So I think he's fantastic. I think the fact that your other leader hits on twos with a bolt rifle is just really good. It's nice and reliable. And you have CP rerolls for days and doctrine rerolls for days. The marksman gives you access to a quite potent ignore obscurity threat, and it's not against a single target. It's just against anyone he wants to shoot, which can lead to some quite interesting stuff if you want to have Overwatch potential towards the end of a turning point. And the heavy intercessor is fantastic for being able to hold objectives and just like eat a melter gun because everyone thinks he's going to die, right? Like you go, I'm going to hit this guy with a plasma gun or whatever, and statistically he doesn't. So
yeah, I can see that. I'll be honest with you. Even though I play way too much of Kill Team, I haven't had a chance to play against this wonderful creation from GW. So I should have no say in where they sit. Apart from the fact that I still see them as an elite team, and that means that if I look at our B plus team, a B plus tier, this is the glass ceiling for them.
yeah. It's an interesting one. So I think they sit just below Warp Coven because they don't have the activations, as he said, to be able to better play with people. But I think they're in B because they are a more durable, more CP efficient version of Intercession. So you're always Wrath of Vengeancing, you're always got a Doctrine up, and you're always ignoring APL and injury. So because you just have so much CP. This team is like, it's absolutely insane how much CP this team gets. So you're just there laughing with how much CP you have. So I think they sit in B tier, not B minus, which is my hot take on them.
Okay, yeah, let's keep them there. As I said, like I should have no say in where they sit because I haven't played it with them or against them. And yeah, they're blue, they're Marines. Yeah, let's just move on.
Big blue Smurfs. All right, what team do you want to cover next?
Maybe let's discuss the absolutely disgusting team in a positive way of saying a disgusting team, and I want to talk about Galapox specifically.
Yeah.
That's why I said disgusting team. I think that Galapox are that surprise appearance for many players who think they are dead or that the time is gone. And I still think that they can do a lot of nasty stuff, especially if we're not on the new kill zone. And I think that they might cause some trouble for the teams at the very top. Maybe not the Pathfinders, because they can out activate them and potentially wither down the Hulks earlier on. But other than that, I think that they're solid sparring partners for Felgor or Commandos. And yeah, I still think they're a good team. What would you say?
I completely agree. I think they are often overlooked because Felgor is a better version, in my opinion, because you just have more threats. But the Hulks are just so good, and so I think they are a problem for a lot of teams in the meta. And this is a team that I think Mandrakes are going to hate seeing across the board.
Oh yeah,
absolutely going to hate seeing it because they don't know how to deal with them.
I'm gonna fight first. Okay, I have 27 wounds. Go on.
It's like, good luck. I roll my 5s up, and we'll see what happens, right? So yeah, I think they're A tier. I hate to say it, but I do think they're better than your Hearthkin Salvagers, and that's probably a grudge taken there. But but I do think they are. They have loads of activations. They have loads of wounds. They have super conceal on the mission guys that they want to do. I've just every time I see them play, I just think to myself, like, this is a team that can just stat check you, and if they roll a lot of 5-ups early in the game, it hurts so much. Conversely, if they roll not very many 5-ups early in the game, then it doesn't matter, because that's the weird thing about the Feel No Pains. It's a disproportionate stacking thing, right? Like if you save them early on, then you have more opportunity to save more later. So yeah, I would put them in A tier, and I think they probably sit towards the top.
Yeah, I would agree that they should sit somewhere in the A tier, probably towards the top. I don't know if they're better than Halfkin, and the reason why I say that is I think it will be very much format dependent, and I think this will continue to be an ongoing theme. When we look at those tier lists, we always have to consider whether we're looking at a tier list for a mixed format, BD, ITD, open. Because if you look at a tournament where bet decima is going to be like 33 or 50% of the boards, all of a sudden I would start I would reconsider the choice of Galapox like at least twice. Like and if you look at that, I would definitely tell you, like, don't you dare to put them above Halfkin. And even if you want to try to put them opposite the board, the teams like Commandos, for instance, or Felgor, where normally I'd say, this is or Mandrakes, right? Like, this is a good idea. Like, depending on the map, it might not be a good idea. I remember I took them once to Warhammer World during the days where they played on those heavily cluttered
with no
boards.
doors. Oh no.
Yeah, like I ended up going with 4 Hulks in a conga line because this was the only pathway through the board to get to my opponent, and this felt horrible. So I'd say yes, they are very strong. Yes, I see them in A tier, probably towards the top, but at the same time, it will depend on where. I mean, it will depend on the exact format for the tournament, the boards that you play, and this will ultimately determine the final placement of this team.
I completely agree. And like Manchester Dan is a perfect example of someone who has been stung multiple times by the terrain layout. So he went to a fest where in the briefing pack it said that doors are going to be used. So he took Galapox, and then he arrived on the day and got told that they were not going to be used. So you can imagine when you looked at those boards, and he I think he spent 3 turning points, getting his hulks out of his deployment zone against a high-tech circle player. And it was just like, it was just one of those things where you go, I don't know what you do in that scenario, because you can't go through the door. You have to try and like shimmy round, page reverse, and all that sort of stuff. It's just gross. So they are very, I think there is some maps like Beta Decima and stuff where they're not going to do well on. So they're not like agnostic of terrain. Whereas I think you're probably right, the Hearthkin are agnostic of terrain. So if you're both playing like open board on TPT maps, I think Galapox are probably going to be the better pick over Hearthkin.
Yeah.
If you're into the dark, I'd probably say the same. But if you're on a different layout, you think maybe not? Well,
yeah, I think maybe not. I guess if you try to face those teams into each other, I know it's not the best way to do it, but then countering the drawn to the hum TP1 may mean that Galapox cannot get to the objectives they want to get to. But like in a more general sense, I still think it will be map dependent, even in ITD. Like,
I guess it depends if you can start your mutants and stuff next to doors. Because if you have to move to get to the door, then the mutants probably can't do the thing they need to do. So
well, on some maps you can drawn to the ham to move them like 3 inches forward, and then you can move 4 towards the door that is like further away, and those doors are usually like within 8 inches of your drop zone, so you can still move like 7 forward with drawn to the ham plus 4 inches movement and open the door. But that obviously telegraphs your play massively. So there's that. But let's keep them in A for now. That would be my suggestion, and see what happens next. Maybe we want to reshuffle that later. But they're definitely a very strong team. And interestingly, I think they even have some play on certain boards that are more scarce, and like that you don't really have as much terrain there, because you still have you have super conceal, and you have 11 activations, and your big hulks have 27 wounds on average, and versus many teams it's okay even if they get below half of that, and they will still be a massive threat to the enemy. So there's that. Who shall we talk about next? Maybe another one of, I think, your favorites, Kazakin?
Oh yeah, I really like to say there is some personal bias. Like, I love the lore of Kazakin. I love Imperial teams, as everyone knows, right? There is one thing I will say about Kazakin that I do think is massively in their favor, which is if you're a good player, you can just make stuff happen the way you want it to happen. So like, it's very difficult to blame the dice with Kazakin. Like, it's very, very rare where something doesn't go right because of dice. And even with like initiative plays and your ability to use the siege initiative tactical ploy and the ability to do the strategic phase dash, they have a lot of strengths. The difficulty that they have is probably the teams that you see in S and A tier right now. I think are going to be very mean for them, that they don't enjoy being out activated. Horde teams can be a struggle for them, and they're still kind of fragile. So they're a weird team where you have total player agency, I think, when you're playing with Kazakin, but they fundamentally they're a 10 model team, and they lack really double kill potential outside of a few grenades.
I largely agree with that. So ultimately what we're looking at is a 10-man mid-range team who's good in killing elites. And it's not dice dependent, so in many aspects they look like novitiates. However, they do not have as many tricks as novitiates when it comes to double killing or multiple kills potential, and in certain aspects they do prove to lack on board. I largely agree. I think novitiates are stronger than them. So for that reason, if you want to put them above them, we'll have a very long argument.
No, I actually agree. So I think the Vitiate and Kazakin do very similar things. I think if I was playing on open board, I'd rather have Kazakin. And if I was playing on
Mhm.
ITD, I'd rather have Novitiates, which is like it's a small thing. It's just where they are. I actually think they're very balanced when they play against each other. Depending upon which train you're in, like that depends upon which team wins generically.
Oh, we're
Assuming
putting them
equal
in
players.
B plus.
But
Okay.
I think they sit there, and the reason is you can't deal with the larger activation teams very easily. You just don't have like the grenade launcher. Like is a double kill maybe, but it's probably just chip damage on the frag profile. And then like what do you do? Like you're now into a 4K charge, but realistically you're 3 attacks, and you're hoping your opponent doesn't roll a parry. Like it's just So they don't have double kill. They're very, very good at killing single models. So if it's a 10 versus 10 or a 10 versus 11, I think that this team does well because you can just guarantee these kills. As soon as you start facing more than that, or you face something like Felgor, which I know people think is a good matchup for them because they can guarantee the crits. I'm just not convinced because
I don't think so.
Because you invest so much in killing one, elite points and all that sort of stuff, and it's still there, right? And now you go, well, what do I do?
Very often it will end up with you putting a goat on frenzy, and then that very same goat killing another one of your operatives.
Yeah.
So
exactly that.
It's
you just trade a melter for a goat every time, or a plasma gun for a goat, and then you trade a grenade launcher for a goat, and then you go, well, I've now run out of threats. What have you got left? And they go, I've still got 7 guys that are all threats to you. And you go, all right, I guess I'll just die then.
So,
I
agree with that. And my advice would be that if you really want to play Kazakin or something similar, take those models, cut their legs in half, and use halfkin rules. And because ultimately, if you think about it, like both are 10-man mid-range teams, but if you think how many tricks halfkin bring to the board in comparison to Kazakin, it's like it's almost like a different league, like of what you can do with a team that's so similar in a way. So there's that. But like jokes aside, I think that they do struggle into teams that out activate them. They will struggle into teams that are at the very top of the meta for various reasons. And I think that B plus, I would say it's a bit generous for them. But again, like I know I'm biased and novitiate, so maybe they should sit where they sit.
You're lucky the novitiate gets to sit above them because on open board, I think it's a Kazakin win. All right, so let's go to what should we talk about next? We've got so many different options here. We haven't, I guess, talked about.
What about the cultists?
The cultists.
Chaos cults.
Yeah, okay. Chaos cults. They got hit quite hard in the nerfs, I think.
Yeah. So I was about to ask you a question. Do you think that with most recent nerfs, we will see them like drop down massively in uptake and win percentage? Do you think it was too much? Do you think it was enough? What would you say about that?
So my difficulty in answering this question, right, is I do have a bit of a skew because I obviously went to World Champs where all the best players in the world were playing cultists, and you could just see the pure potential that the team had, and them getting hit was definitely needed, and I think the latest round of nerfs is probably fine. I think the reason why they look so bad right now was the lack of nerfs to the teams that I thought would have been hit harder. So I actually think now they're probably in a good place, and I think a lot of people will think that they'll cast them out as potentially way worse than they are. But I think they sit in the middle of the meta, and I think the reason why they do that is because the other melee teams at the moment are just flat stronger. Like in the past, before these nerfs, cults would eat Felgor and probably eat Galapox. But now Colts have
Yeah.
to play this really difficult game of using their icon, which becomes so critical to this team's success, to make those fights work for them. And those other melee teams aren't reliant on that as such. So I think personally, Colts sit in B tier. I think they're still fundamentally a 14 body team now, with melee potential, with damage reduction, and with a good late game opportunity, and the healing as well is still very impactful. But they were nowhere near where they were, because they were S tier for a very long time. Where
Oh
they
yeah,
sit
they
in
were
B tier,
definitely.
I'm happy to be debated, but I would suggest that they're above Strike Force and probably above Warp Coven. But someone could tell me that Zangors could eat them now, and I probably believe it. And so maybe these two can switch around. I'm not too sure. What's your
I
thoughts?
think we can keep them at the very top of B, even if only for the sole reason that they still have 14 bodies,
Yeah,
and that cannot be underestimated. Like the importance of that. I think, of generally speaking, the team is in a good spot after all those changes, more or less. Yes, I can hear that some people might say, "Oh, yeah, this is not enough," or "This is too much," because obviously there will be both groups that they will like shout equally loud. But in a way, I prefer them to sit where they are right now, because previously, if we take like a look at how it looked like a few months back or half a year ago, when you faced cultists, then right off the bat, you had to engage in advanced gymnastics not to
yeah,
lose the game, just because they will do one of the mutation shenanigans, and there you go, you're done. And there was nowhere to hide from those massive horrors. And yeah, so I'd say it's better for the game in general to see them, even if they go bash a bit too hard, which I don't think is the case. I think they're in the hands of a good player. They can still win events. They are still very strong. Um, but even if across the board, in the hands of, let's say, average player or not so experienced player, they will not perform as well as we'd like them to. I think it's for the better of the whole game, because it wasn't fun to just see mirror matches of cultists, or cults on every other top table.
yeah, I agree, and I don't think. Yeah, I agree with all what you said, and I still think they're capable of winning stuff. It's just that the teams that are outperforming them are just better versions of themselves, and in my opinion, those teams should probably be toned down, um, and that's why they sit where they sit. And they would have a better win rate, and they would be better represented if the other melee focused players were playing them rather than the Felgor or Galabox, which is where I think people will sit. Um,
Yeah, I believe that Hulk should be bigger. I mean, that like from a thematic standpoint, my preference is that the Galapox Hulk should be the biggest pile of meat that we'll face in the game,
just want to see
at least
meat
until the
bumping into each other.
Patriarch comes out.
Oh god, patriarch. That's gonna be something. That's another tier list. We'll cover that another time. 'Cause that's gonna be a spicy one. All right, let's move on to I've got another contender for what I think is B tier, and I'll be interested to hear your thoughts. I think Corsairs sits in B tier. I think they are like fine. Like they do that, they're good against elites. They're okay against hordes. They're just not very reliable. And I think you'll do 2-2, 3-1, and in one of those games you'll just go, "Yeah, I rolled badly," and I don't really know what the solution is to that other than making them more reliable. But I think if you did, they would suddenly skyrocket. Like they would go from if you gave the team reliability, they'd go from B to probably A to S tier straight away. They've got loads of good tricks. I love Deadly Ambush, but they just don't do enough reliably for me.
Yeah, I think they should sit in B where they sit. I think they're probably better than Justin. I think they definitely gain quite a bit when it comes to reliability with the previous balance patch, where
with the
they got
outcast
that
change. Yeah,
the better reroll rule within outside of 3 of your other operatives rather than outside of 6.
it's great in
Is
melee, but again, they lack
Yeah,
the problem where they are an 8 wound team trying to go into melee, and they trade poorly. But that's their best
yeah,
play. That's where they're most reliable.
yeah. The other thing is that they are one of those teams which I would describe as the gotcha team. Like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and yeah. I actually lost to them at the very last tournament at Warhammer World in the last season,
So are we saying S tier
and
then? Is that where they belong? Is that?
no, definitely not. No. And yeah, like that was a great example of why Kill Team is a great game. I couldn't see the door that was right in front of me, and that cost me a grenade to the face in the first activation. So it was definitely an example of my great play. But, but yeah, sometimes that happens. But outside of such situations, um, these guys are actually they probably fall within that category of teams that are a bit too fair. Like in a way, if you learn the gotchas, then they might be a worse version of Hunterclade.
Yeah,
I mean, like if you know they're gotchas, because obviously if you don't, then you may get caught by one of those. But if you do know them and if you play around them, then ultimately, yeah, they might end up to be a weaker version of Hunterclade, and this is not great. This is definitely not a place where you want to be.
for sure, for sure.
Okay, I have a suggestion for another bad team,
Okay,
like a
yeah,
team
that's it.
that could use some love, and the team that it definitely is waiting for the next balanced data slate to finally to get some buffs. And I'm obviously talking about Nemesis Claw. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm talking about Blades of Cain.
Yes.
And I think they unfortunately my perception is that they sit next to the close friends Hand of the Archon and Krut. I think that and unfortunately I see them as a weak team. They do have plenty of good tricks, but before the Void Dancer nerfs, I would say like why would you ever pick Blades of Cain if you can play with Harlequins? Now I'm like, yeah, I can see some arguments, but this is not because Blades of Cain became better. This is because Void Dancers are suddenly much worse. All things considered, I'd say top of C, yeah, probably top of C, maybe bottom B minus, not to raise too many loud voices arguing that these elves are actually strong.
Yeah, so dude, I completely agree. I think they've got a few problems, right? And I guess I was quite hyped about this team because I saw how many different abilities that they had, right? And they do have like so many like weird things that they can pull off. And being all 3 APL is fantastic for a lot of the missions in this game. But fundamentally, I think it's their 4 attacks in melee that lets them down, and they don't really like have a way to make that better.
Yeah, I can see
Like
that. Like in the most comic way, you let's say you see your opponent bring them on the board against your team, and at certain part of the game, try to find that cinematic moment where your opponent goes like 2 backflips, shuriken, squat, shuriken, dash, shuriken. 3 command points, shuriken, and another backflip. Okay, I didn't kill your guy. So, so, so it's like I think that they just they have a potential to be a very cinematic team. But if you want to play competitive kill team, cinematic plays are probably not what you're after. And yeah, that's why even though, and by cinematic I mean yes, they can do lots of cool things but ultimately we don't win those games by doing cool stuff. We win
Yeah.
those games because we control the primaries, or we do our attack ops better than our opponents, and I don't think they do much well against the rest of the field when it comes to that.
I think they could give the entire team balanced, and it would seriously help them, because that is effectively 5 attacks in a different way, and it would just because the amount as you know, I played against Dave at the tournament, and he just couldn't kill stuff when he really should have been, and I think that's the problem. And like weirdly, probably the best way to play the team at the moment is just running all striking scorpions because I think they're the most effective ones. I know Howling Banshees have
Yeah,
weird
possibly.
like use in ITD with their X-Arc's insane. But generic, I genuinely think the best option is just all striking scorpions because it gives you access to the best aspect techniques twice per turning point, which is really important. But even then, I still think the chainswords just don't have the reliability that I want to kill stuff, and the shuriken pistols don't have that reliability either. And like their strategic ploys to give them that reliability have these weird caveats. And whenever it's like, you know, if I shoot someone, I want to be shooting someone who's already activated, but I want to be fighting someone who's not yet activated. It's like you're an elite team that has this. Oh well, I just want to, you know, I'm trying to make it work in this weird way, and you just don't need it. So I think top of C is probably fair for them. I think they'll
Yeah,
kill
I can
group
see
fine and
that.
they'll kill
Like
handy out.
the other problems that I definitely have is like one that you mentioned is obviously only 4 attacks in melee, but the other thing is that they haven't got a single actually heavy and effective gun. That's
Yeah.
definitely a problem. Like I remember when they came out, and one of my colleagues from the old ones, Guy, wanted to test them out. No, sorry, it wasn't Guy. I played against Alex back then, another player from the London community. But Alex wanted to test them out, and he brought his models, and I thought, like, what the hell? I'm gonna bring my Hive fleet, and I took 3 Tyranid warriors as half of my roster, and then we quickly realized that with feeding tendrils mean that if a Tyranid warrior kills someone in melee, they regain D3 lost wounds.
Yeah.
Blades of Cain
It's gross.
had no effective way of killing those beasts. And that was a compendium team against a bespoke team for the elves. So in a way, like I think this is where they should sit. They lack on many different aspects when it comes to what makes a good team and kill team.
If you have some version of just a scratch, or you have, you can affect their weapon skill modifier, or you can reduce their attacks characteristic, this team is going to suck. And there are now multiple teams in the meta, at the top of the meta, that do that. And I think that's why it's going to... They're in a bad place at the moment, and I don't think it's getting better for them. And I think you have to be playing very, very well to make most of that team. Alrighty, let's talk about a team that is... So we talk about swingy and reliability issues, but potentially, but potentially do have a lot of very strong abilities. But my God, are they unreliable? So this is my opinion on Inquisition Squad, because I've seen all of the top players that I know: Ace, Mateusz, myself, Guy. I'm trying to think who else has played them recently that I've seen. All of these players have done exceptionally well with this team, except in 1 or 2 games. And it's almost always because their quarry didn't activate in the way they wanted it to, and suddenly their dice failed them, and it just didn't work out the way they wanted it to work.
Yeah, I can see that. Like, they're definitely a team that's not reliable, and if you're going to tournament has like 6+ rounds, like let's
You
say
just can't.
7 rounds. You just like at some point you'll have a game where your dice fail you, and we all know that Mateusz is a great player
The king of
and
ones.
an absolute monster. But I remember a conversation we had at Warhammer World once, and he said like, I missed everything. And I was like, well, you play a team that hits on fours, so tough luck.
It will happen more than
And
you want
yeah,
it to.
yeah, exactly. So it will happen. Like no matter how good you are at the game, at some point it will happen, and it will cost you a game if you're facing good opponents. So there's that. The way I see Inquisition, obviously absolute authority, it's one of the best abilities in the game.
I agree with that.
Like hands down. If you can just say, no, my dear friend, you're not playing this now. You can wait until the next turning point. This is one of the strongest plays you can pull off in Kill Team, just to tell your opponent, no, you're not doing that. That's why I praise Locator so much. That's why I like the new abilities from Nemesis Claw and Mandrake so much. That in a different way, because they prevent operatives from being activated. But like telling your opponent, no, my dear friend, you're not allowed to do that at this very point. This is very strong. The other thing is that I see Inquisition as a team that will throw that blessed grenade, and this is their reliability. Like with you take the Breacher Grenadier, you give them a blessing, and you throw a fancy grenade, and you kill something with it. This is your reliability. And after that, you're playing with Quarry and some melee counterpunch, where I actually believe that at that point is likely that your melee counterpunch is somewhat better than your shooting. Maybe outside of that pistolier with plasma, but yeah, all things considered, reliability is a problem for them, definitely. Do I see them as a strong team regardless? I would say yes, simply because they still have a lot of bodies, they still have a lot of activations, and they have absolute authority. And if you take absolute authority out of the equation, maybe not very bad, but they're much worse. But with that ability, like my take is that they should still be somewhere A, maybe B plus.
I think B plus. I was just thinking now, like I think Blooded's better than them, and I think Novitiates and Kazakin are more reliable.
Yeah.
So it's like a weird dice game. I'm almost tempted to push Blooded into A tier the more I think about it.
I was about to say that
And
because
like,
we're getting too big of a B plus tier. So
I think
oh
if
my
Blooded
God,
sits at the bottom of A, and I think Inquisition sits just below. The problem is that they have such a good ability into all of the field, but it's just unreliable. And I guess this is where it's like this is a play style question, right? Like I personally prefer reliability over potential. Like the team has massive potential, but it's not going to give it to you very often. And whereas I know like Kazakin is going to do exactly what I ask it to do when I want it to do it, so I can always blame myself when it doesn't go right. Like, so I think they might sit just below Kazakin. No, because Kazakin, they've got too many models. There's many charge them.
Yeah,
I'm going to stick them in the middle. So I think novitiates. So this is where I think they sit. They don't. The Inquisition doesn't have the melee potential to kill novitiate melee. I think they don't like that trading game. But they can tie up the Kazakin guys and just not fight them. Like they can just sit
yeah,
there.
let's keep them there. Let's keep them there.
But like the classic thing you'll see people do is just you'll lose initiative as Inquisition. You'll nominate a quarry that's your. Let's say you're playing Seek and Destroy. It's your eliminate guard, and they'll just run that model away. And then you have an entire turning point.
I think this is where you have to keep that other ploy that you can use only once per game, where you you delay, denounce, and delay the activation of your quarry in case you do lose initiative. But it may happen more than once, so that's the other thing. Yeah.
And then you're out of options. So like you have to save denounce when you don't have initiative. and you have to use quarry on the right person. And there is a chance that you just, even with that, because it's fours with balanced, there's a chance that you just whiff. I don't like the fact that the team is locked into playing basically breaches only. I think personally what they should do is make the Kazakin models and the RBTs models 6-man teams in that like that grouping. And I think that might help them, because then they could run RBTs and they would be slightly more reliable, and they could go full melee skew if they wanted to. But I think they sit there. I think because you could just have good dice and you would win all your games. Like, they have all the abilities to do that. But I just think that you're gonna like lose one or two in a tournament. And as I've said, I've seen the best players in the world play with that team and not crush tournaments that everyone would expect them to do so. And Ace and Mateusz are the people that I'm thinking of when that.
Oh yeah, of course, and that's the worst thing about that. If I play Novitiates, you play Kaskin, and Mateusz plays Inquisition, Mateusz can always say, "Oh, it's because of the lack of reliability of my team, and you guys, you play the most reliable teams in the game, so it's a matter of your skill."
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
we're on to you, Mateusz. We know what you're gonna do. We know you're gonna blame.
Yeah.
But no,
jokes aside, I think we're in agreement that this is ultimately a quite solid team. Absolute Authority will carry it through many situations. You still have plenty of bodies, and you still have some cool tricks, like with the Blessed Grenade, because this is a very reliable grenade in this otherwise unreliable team. And you have some melee options, you have some long range options. However, outside of that, your team hits on fours, and if you give me a team and say this team hits on fours and it may get balanced, I'm gonna say no. So playing Halfkin, like you sometimes get the attack order, and you take your bolters, and you may get a shot because your opponent may give you a shot. Okay, you can shoot me with your P1 bolter hitting on fours with that balance from the attack token, and let's say hypothetically you misplay, and that's your very last model to activate, not one of your gunners, but just a simple guy with a bolter. This is where your opponent may take that risk, because you're likely not to do much with that 4+ balanced bolter. So there's that.
No, I agree. What do you want to cover next?
What about? I'm thinking about recent events, and Shane won Adepticon with Necrons, and then they got reworked. I don't want to say buffed or nerfed. I want to say reworked, because I think this is what it is. So I'd like to look at Necrons. I personally think they're still quite strong, actually very strong.
Agreed.
I like the change to Nanomine. I think it was broken, and I remember we exchanged a few messages like 2 weeks ago, and we had a conversation about Necrons. It's like Nanomine is still strong. It's just that now it will cut off an objective point for your opponent, rather than
the entire board.
Simply saying, "Oh, you cannot move out of your drop zone." Like, I know it's so unfair. So yeah, I'd say they're still very strong. The increased reliability when it comes to them coming back to the game heavily changes the attrition capabilities, because now you can more often play the attrition game, because you expect your models to come back more often. So I think this is a huge change. I still think that the Chronomancer is the go-to option. The other options now simply become viable. Like you can choose them every now and then, but I would still say Nanomine, because you still can cut off an objective point from your opponent, and Chronometron, because that final pain plus range movement is a huge deal. And the reason why I say they're still strong is that I look at their nanomine from the perspective of how much I can achieve with a short-legged grenadier from Halfkin, who has a fringe bubble nanomine as well. And I look at Necrons and I say, okay, so your guy still flies, still can throw it very deep into the board. It simply has a smaller radius. I know it's a big deal. It has a smaller radius because size difference, but at the same time, as I said, you can still cut off an objective, or on certain maps you'll still be able to cut off a huge chunk of the board simply because you put it in a good spot,
Yeah.
and you're more reliable coming back, and your apprentice got a further APL, and and on top of that, you're more reliable to come back, so you'll have fewer games where someone catches your cryptic somehow and they shoot them off the board, and your cryptic doesn't get up in the following turning point, and all of a sudden, oh, I lost. So due to all of those factors, I would personally put them in S tier, and yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing your feedback and comments on that.
Interesting. So you put them in S tier. So we've also seen recently, because at the Nottingham tournament, the 64-player tournament there, Hyrotech, piloted by Ben Palin, came second, so undefeated 4-0, doing really well post Data Slate. We've seen them do well pre-Data Slate, and I think you touched on all the reasons why they are so good now. And I think that probably for me the biggest change is that Apprentech, because he has gone from someone that you would probably never take on the team. Like, I think genuinely, when the team first came out, a Immortal was better, to now an auto include. So I was thinking about the matchup with Felgor, and I reckon you still take the Apprentech, even though he doesn't have lethal weapons, right? Because the entire team can have lethal weapons, particularly if you play ITD, it's hilarious. Your shooting becomes lethal as well. But weirdly, in that one matchup, you go, not this time. So I agree that I think they are very strong. And you think you'd put them above the Hearthkin?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
I mean, when the balance data slate dropped, I thought, no, they should sit probably somewhere in A tier. Then I read some comments from good players, and I listened to some feedback, and opinions of good players. And I think to the extent I got convinced that they're so good that they should sit in S tier. But I could easily see them somewhere top of A as well. And
so for me, they either sit top of A or S tier. Do I think?
Again, this might be a case of what maps are you playing on? Because and unfortunately, this is going to be a recurring nightmare for all of us when we want to do tier lists, or even choose a team for a tournament. Like, depending on the format and the maps that's going to be played on that tournament, you will look at the format and then be like, okay, on this format, actually, I don't like Necrons as much. Or on this format, I don't like Galapogs because there's too much Beta Decima, and I don't fancy running up the gun trees with my Hulks. So yeah, but in the vacuum, or if we assume it's a third of each, I think we can safely put them top of A, maybe bottom of Metaverse. But I personally don't like to have too many teams in the S tier, so maybe top of A is
so the reason why I think they sit there is, so for instance, let's say you go into like a good gunline team like Pathfinders. You have to remember that they keep all the Markolites. So even though you regenerate the next turn, let's say if you got tagged up to 5 before, then you're still going to be on 4 the next turning point when it degrades. So you come back, but you're still at risk. And then some of the melee teams I still think can tie you up quite effectively. Because you're good in melee, or you're okay in melee, but you're still not great. So I think top of A is good. I think they score really well. I could be persuaded to chuck them into into the bottom of S. I guess we'll see where the last few teams fall out, and then we can probably make that call. I guess my one thing on them is they don't have that many activations. So they, and we have to remember that two of their guys are still just like counters. So you effectively have 6 threats on the board, and one of the Apprentech threats, he's not that dangerous. He's a mission player. So you have 3 mission players and then 5 threats, and that's probably where the team sits. So not bad, but yeah, I think they're going to sit roughly there, and we'll see. Maybe the last few teams will affect where these fall out.
Yeah. Okay, let's do that. There's a funny parallel that you look at top of S and top of A, because both teams have essentially operatives that live twice.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
the threat saturation in each of those teams might be what actually draws that differential between those teams. And goats like should sit at the very top of S or somewhere close to the top of S, whereas Necrons, yeah, maybe they should sit top of A.
And I think Necrons have actually a better matchup into goats than most. Like being able to reduce their movement, having access to lots of lethal, and being able to regenerate just outside of melee when they kill you is really good for them. So I think we'll sit in there for now. But we'll see, because I think there's a few more teams, and like the next team I want to talk about, because this is probably going to impact where we sit this team as well. Wormblade. So this is a team that I think is vying for one of like the top positions. Not in, I don't think S tier. I think they don't have quite enough for that, but I do think they're an A tier team. And I guess for me, if I was to chuck them in right now, I think they are just below Galapox, but above Starstriders.
I'm happy that you want to put them there, because I wanted to say that, yes, I agree regarding A tier, but I don't want to see them above any of the top 3 A tier teams.
Yeah. So my opinion on this is they don't have much melee punch. I know they have the cult agents and the locust and stuff, but you really want to be trying to keeping those guys alive to do as much damage to your opponent as possible. And then if you're taking a lot of return damage, they're still only 9 wounds. They die quite quickly in melee. So you always want the Kelemorph, and then you can be persuaded with the Locust going forwards. But the thing that I think this team struggles on is scoring tac ops reliably, because I think Seek and Destroy is their best bet, but then you're having to go into a Locust sort of loadout, and for Rob and Ransack or something like that, that's hard to keep that kind of model alive. And I think we in the game I played against Guy, I think we saw it. Like he had to get an early kill with his Locust, and then he couldn't have it later on for like a Rob and Ransack, and it's difficult to get the movement to get, say, like Route or something like that. So I don't think they score too well, but I think they have some great abilities. What do you think about them? Any other counter thoughts?
Yeah, I generally agree. The problem I have with this team is that ultimately you have certain models which act as your powerhouse as the actual engine of your team, like Kelemorph, like Locust. Outside of that, you have that gunner with the mining laser, which is also a huge threat. But other than that, yes, you'll have the mini dynamite or micro dynamite, the blasting charge, but that might as well not do much. And other than that, you end up with what with guys carrying shotguns, like not really that great. So in a way, if your opponent manages to catch one of your key pieces, this team may fall apart quite quickly, which is what I think ultimately puts them beneath or below the top of the meta. But because if you look at Commandos or Falgo, like most of those operatives more or less can do the same thing, and each of them is a threat in its own way. But when you look at Windblade, well, we have those key operatives, and other than that, you don't have much. So yeah.
And I think like in we're talking about those sort of those top tier teams. I think they just have better matchups into them. And again, we talk about double kill potential. Really, that's only possible with your cult agents. And then if you throw them away early, then you become in like it gets really difficult later on. So I think we're happy where they are. Middle of
Okay.
A tier
Yeah,
seems
yeah, yeah,
seems
yeah. I
pretty
agree.
fair to me.
This is where they more or less where they should be. What about Phobos?
Now, I think Phobos struggle with the exact same problems of all elite teams. I think they have some interesting tools to deal with them, but I still think they're elite teams, and I still think that their saving grace was always smoke grenades, and even their sort of biggest hunter, the Kazakin, now has access to just deny that on one of their models a turn. I love the way that Phobos can play the mission with Reavers, but again, I think they lack reliability, and I think that they have some potentially really bad matchups, which they can't do too much about.
You mean our B plus tier?
Yeah, B plus, A, and S
And
tiers.
above, right? Yeah,
So
yeah.
I think that they sit in B. I think that they are just below Corsairs. I mean, I could argue to go either way because you can run the Reavers and then you have a good chance at fighting them in melee. But Corsairs out activate you. I guess I can't deal with the obscurity. Maybe they're better than Corsairs.
Yeah, maybe they are. Like, funnily enough, before the balance data slate dropped, so before the release of Nightmare and the most recent changes, I would possibly rate them as the best elite team in the game.
Yeah,
Just because of how many things they're capable of doing in each of their activations. But now, like, I'd say Warp Coven are better, and yeah, as people may already know, Nemesis Claw is likely to be way better as well. So yeah, I think this is where they more or less where they should sit. However, I'm not so sure whether they ultimately should be positioned above Corsairs. Well, maybe they should because of maybe solely because of the sheer number of things they could do during their activations, which is still way more than Corsairs could do when they face random opponents.
yeah.
Uh, maybe this is why we should keep them like where they sit right now. But yeah.
I can
Uh,
see it both ways because like I can see that if you don't have the smoke grenades in the right place at the right time, the Corsairs are just going to nuke your models. And even then, probably at the start of Turning Point 2, like you have to use your Omni Scrambler. So you have to set up your infiltrator. It's like one of those things to shut down the Corsair player. Phobos is going to have to be thinking about a lot of stuff, right? You need your infiltrators in the right place to Omni Scramble the right guys. You need your smoke grenades in the right place to protect your models on Turning Point 1 from a blaster shot. And even then, you're still at risk of just being charged by like the relentless power weapons kind of dude. So it's a tough one. It really is. And I guess the main divider here is that the Corsair player is going to have the activation advantage. So I'm going to stick them below Corsairs because I think Corsairs.
Okay, yeah, let's do
Cause,
that. The other thing is that, and this is also an important argument we need to consider, is that Phobos are ultimately a team that's quite difficult to run
oh, for
because
sure. Yeah,
it's
they are
easy
tough.
to just hit a brick wall with them, and ultimately you need a good player to run that team. Because if you look at the stats, they're not like that great when it comes to raw stats. And yes, they could do many things, but you only have 6 models, and ultimately, if you make some positioning mistakes, or you don't utilize all of your fancy abilities and backflips properly, you might end up losing too many operatives too early and just lose the game. So yeah,
Yeah.
let's keep them where they are. What next?
Let's do Scout Squad because that will leave Legionaries and Nemesis Squad. I think that'll be interesting to talk through. Have you played many games with Scout Squad or played against Scout Squad much at all?
Not really,
They're
but
pretty niche
looking
at the moment,
at
aren't they?
yeah, that's like I think there is a reason why most players prefer to pick other teams, and that reason is that yeah, if you look again, this is a mid-range team. By mid-range, I mean like 10 bodies. and two
Actually, only 9.
APL. 9. They have 9. Okay, let's say they still qualify as a mid-range team, but yeah, like unfortunately, this is they're not great. Like yes, you have one fully pledged Marine, and apart from that, it's a struggle.
So they are a 2 APL, 9 body team with one source of comms. I just think they lack the APL efficiency to do anything. Like, if you can just zone this team out of scoring by sitting on objectives, and there's nothing they can do. Like there's nothing they can do about it. Like, if you're playing capture, you just run guys onto objectives, and they go, all right, well, I guess I just won't score this turn, and that is difficult. And almost every team out activates them. I think they could give this team an extra body, and it wouldn't be a problem if they keep them at 2 APL. Or they need to give them or they could give the team each operative could become pseudo 3 APL. Like, they could make them have a free fight or shoot, something like that. Because at the moment, this team is just
still not be enough.
Yeah, like they're not doing, I think, anything that they need to do. And again, they have so many weird requirements in their reliability mechanics. And all of their special weapons being heavy as well. It's like, I don't know, it's a lot of different things.
Unfortunately, picking this team right now is almost equal to trying to make this game more difficult than it should be for yourself. And even if they had the 10th body, and even if my memory was correct about that, I would still rate them very, very low. And that probably gives away that I'm gonna make maybe my last controversial statement of today's evening, and that's gonna be Scouts are the worst team in the game right now.
Yeah, are they better than Hand of the Archon? I don't.
Well, know. Ryan, you cannot have Hand of the Archon as the worst team in the game, because the wave of hate you're going to have to withstand may just shatter Turning Point Tactics in its entirety.
I agree that they sit somewhere down here, though. So I agree with you. I think APL efficiency just isn't good for them. Like, if you're playing loot with this team, just good luck. Like, I don't know what you do. Like, you just run out of APL to actually kill anything or do anything at all useful. And your leader's comms ability, it's restrictive. I think it's fine. I think they could potentially, if you get some early kills against Hand of the Archon, because you are both 9 activations, you might be able to kill them. I think the Kroot are just going to run away with points against you. There's just good luck trying to stop that. And even Blades of the Cane is going to contest your objectives. So yeah, I think that's a good place for them to sit. There's somewhere in here you can argue between who's the worst team in the game between Drakari and Scouts at the moment.
But it's not looking ultimately, what we probably have to agree on is that if we look at the bottom 4, we can probably agree that those teams are equally bad, more or less.
Yes, in different ways, so, but yes, they're equally bad.
There are different reasons for which they are very bad. So as much as we could probably spend even more time discussing whether Hand of the Archon or Kroot are better, or whether Blades of Cane or Scouts are better, then those teams are just not good enough as of now in comparison to the other teams in the game, at least from the competitive standpoint, because we have to remember that we're looking at competitive perspective only. And in this case, I'd say, of course, if you're a diehard fan of Scouts, and for whatever reason Scouts and not fully pledged Marines, play them. But at least as of now, I think you should play them with high expectations towards the next balanced data slate.
Yeah, they must get some love. All 4 of these teams at the bottom, I would expect to be getting love. I can see the Void Dancers not, because they just got nerfed. So, but I can see Exaction getting love. So I think that these 5 teams down here will get something in the next data slate. My opinion.
I know you really want to see a buff for Exaction Squad. I'm telling you what's going to happen. That's my prediction. That's my hot take for today, and that's going to be Exaction are not going to get any buff, but Harlequins won't have to traverse.
yeah. Like they'll change the nerf to Harlequins, and Exaction will stay where they are. I mean, I just really want my police boys to be good, but never mind. All right, so let's talk about Legionary, because this is a team that I think has one viable play route now, based on how much AP and damage is in the game, which is Tzeentch. Like, you have to have Tzeentch in your roster. And I think based on the melee teams that are in the game, you also have to have Slaanesh. And I know, like, the Perpetual Aggression Khorne option is great, and I love the reliability of Nurgle. And for instance, against a lot of these teams, Nurgle is the better pick. But against the teams that you suck against, it will not save you, right? Like, against Kazakin, Nurgle is an auto lose, whereas Tzeentch makes it a dice game. And like, even like, say the novitiates, Sister Superior, whatever her name is, with the plasma pistol, if you're running Nurgle, that's a dead Marine. Like, done, end of question. If you're running Tzeentch, you might just roll
I
flops.
agree with that. But surprisingly, this particular matchup, if we have any Legionary players here, my recommendation would be to always take something other than Nurgle and other than Tzeentch into novitiates, because with plasma, if they roll one crit and then fix another die into another crit, then it will be difficult for you to survive anyway, even if you're Tzeentch. And if you look at Flamers, they don't care about your 4-up invuln. They just wanted to shoot you anyway.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
So in a way, I'm more scared of Khorne and Slaanesh, because these two can allow Legionary to one-shot my models. And but yeah, like even aside of that fact, and because this is very much matchup specific, I agree with your take. Tzeentch is probably something you have to have on your roster. But then again, I would say that Legionary maybe even worse than Warp Coven right now.
Yeah, it's a weird one, isn't it? Like, I didn't think I'd ever say that. But are they worse than Warp Coven? I think they might be, in a sense that I think I think Legionary would beat Warp Coven. I just think that they would lose to Corsairs more often than not. And they sit in this weird place where they're somewhere in B tier. And like, I think they beat most of B tier, but lose to Corsairs. So maybe they're at the top of B or middle of B. I don't know, but I'd
say middle of B. I'd say they should be just beneath Warp Coven. And the reason for that is that Legionary, looking at our S, A, and B plus tiers, they will probably struggle against most, if not every single team in those tiers. And they did not really gain anything in the recent changes, whereas Warp Coven actually gained quite a lot with +1 wound on Zangos, which we covered, and the crit knockdown to regular damage on the sorcerers, which combined increases their survivability and combined wound count of the team significantly. So there's that.
And the sorcerers can actually take on, I think, that the standard Legionaries fairly well in melee. Not the Grizzly Trophy guy, you can't kill him, and not the Anointed. But like the other 4 models, like if you pair up all right, you're probably going to be okay. So you just have to shoot those models with the Soul Reaper cannons. It's a weird matchup where you have to try and force people into the right models. I think it's in Legionary's favour, but yeah. So I think we sit them there. I think that's a fair place for them to be.
Yeah,
they're fine. It's entirely a dice game against a lot of the teams on top of the meta, but yeah, which
okay.
is not the case, in my opinion, for
Yeah,
Nemesis Claw.
I just wanted to say, last but not least, like when we went through this tier list, you can clearly see that there is that glass ceiling for the elite teams in the B plus tier and above, where most elite teams will struggle to fight those opponents. However, the Nemesis Claw have so many fancy tools that I think they will break that ceiling. And the reason why I say that, the leader is an absolute monster with potential justice scratch. The ability that they have to Vox Scream is ridiculous. I would put it on similar level to Absolute Authority or Justice Scratch, maybe even better than Justice Scratch, because as I said, I rate those abilities which prevent your opponent from doing what they want to do uh, very highly. And if you look at Justice Scratch, this is exactly that kind of ability. But that ability means, okay, if I try to kill you here, you will negate one of my attack dice. But Vox Scream just says, no, you're not activating that model.
Yeah.
Full stop. Like that, just wait for the next activation, or actually I'm gonna kill them first. So this is hugely important. And then when you think about what you can add on top of that with the delay of your own activations from the prescience points, what you're gaining is an ability to manipulate the flow of the turning point both ways. You can both say, oh, I'm going to actually start activating a bit later now. And you can delay your opponent's activation when you think, oh, you're a bit too hasty here, my friend. So now you're going to wait a moment. So, and that in itself, if someone told me, but as a new elite team, they can both tell you not to activate your model and they can wait with their activation, I would say, yeah, this is huge. This was actually like the ability to say, oh, I'm just going to pass and you activate again on Hand of the Archon is one of the cooler things that they can do. Because they have to spend a command point to do that. And here you can just do it multiple times then.
I want to touch on one of the matchups that everyone is going to be thinking about, right? So let's talk about Kazakin. So this team versus Kazakin is, on paper, elite team versus elite hunters is gross. But let's talk about turning point 2, because like most of the time, most good players are going to position in a way where they're not going to overcommit, right? So turning point 1, they're probably not going to lose any models, okay? But almost guaranteed is you're going to have 2 Kazakin models on 3 APL ready to kill a model turning point 2. Probably ready to kill 2 models. Now, normally, Kazakin might win initiative, yeet themselves forward, kill a guy, and then you then maybe kill the other guy, and you go, sweet, I've traded 1 for 1. That's exactly what Kazakin want to do. Then they'll kill that guy, etc., etc. The cycle continues. But they've done what they need to with their weapons. And even if Kazakin lose the initiative, they're still going to kill someone. But now the Kazakin player has this horrible moment, right, where they go, oh, I've won initiative. I'm going to activate this guy. You go, I'm delaying his activation. Take the suboptimal pick. Go shoot your melter gun at the guy with the Grizzly trophy. And that guy might also, by the way, have just a scratch. So now you've got a melter gun with 2 attacks going against the leader. And it's like, well, that's just not going to do anything.
Yeah, and the other thing, like if I may interrupt you for just a moment, like even if you want to set up that fancy shot on your gunner into one of those Marines, normally you would be like, okay, I'm just gonna position myself in a way that I can, get you from further up. But with these guys, what you also have to consider on top of that is their fancy obscurity and that on top of everything else. So in the positioning against that team will be much harder for those fancy gunner plays. And
Absolutely,
if you think about obscurity combined with the ability to just Vox Scream at someone, it might be hard for you to make good positioning plays, to end up with an upper hand, making those trades on board. Because what that tells me is that you have to either consider playing from defense position. So you're gonna do counter punches, but this is not exactly what you want to do. Turning point if you go into an elite player, because you want to start killing them early so they don't kill you, and you can't really do that. Or you may want to consider oversaturation, but this puts you in a very dangerous spot. So in a way, it's like no, not really a good strategy. If that makes sense. And ultimately, Nemesis Claw, if they want to, again, like we discussed that before with another team, they can make a decision to play defensively. Because if you're lucky and you roll D3 for 6 prescience tokens and you're very conservative turning point 1, then in theory, I'm not saying it's going to be a good play, but in theory, you could wait out 6 activations turning point 2 before you do anything.
Yeah. And I think like realistically, you're always going to be saving for the just a scratch.
Oh yeah, that as well. Like
because
if
it's
if
so
someone
strong. And I guess the reason why I should touch on this as well, like if you make your armor save, so you have a 3-up save, which you're going to CP reroll for definite if you fail it, and you just a scratch the other hit, a plasma gun doesn't kill you. Unless the melt gun gets a crit, it won't kill your leader. Like that is some wild like durability. And bear in mind, you're probably not having rerolls, and you might be -1 attack dice. The point that I was just wanted to hit on as well is the risk to the Kazakin player if you lose initiative versus Nemesis Claw, right? Because let's say you set yourself up so you are in threat range now of these two guys. Well, they're going to charge one of you, kill you, maybe get a double kill, and remove all your APT weapons. You now go to activate your second APT weapon. Denied.
they say Vox screen.
And so suddenly you've now lost all of your capability through one initiative roll. I know you can reroll initiative roll as Kazakin. I know it's in your favor. But if it goes wrong, suddenly you're just out of the fight. The Just a Scratch, the Grizzly Trophy, that durability buff cannot be underestimated. The ability to shut off rerolls is massive for certain teams. Like it completely changes the way that like Wormblade and Star Striders and Hyrotech have to play into these teams. If you're a reroll reliant team, like it's a completely different ballpark. I think this team's really strong. I still think that they're going to struggle against, teams like your Pathfinders who can just out-activate you with so many activations. But at least I think it's a bit better.
I'd say I would put them beneath Halfkin. Like I know they're very strong,
Yes.
but I think Halfkin still kill them with fancy grudge tokens, and they have certain it just the threat saturation from Halfkin is probably another level of that glass ceiling for elites. Because even if you play better than your opponent, you might end up in a situation where a regular P1 bolter will kill you because you have 3 grudge tokens on you, and that's it.
Yeah.
So there's that. There's a funny interaction which I think for about just now, which is the Vox Scream versus Spaceship Laser from Star Striders.
That is an interesting point.
Because because the laser, the support asset, is instead of the activation of a model.
So I think you
and
can
Vox
delay an operative. You can't delay an activation.
Exactly. I think you can say, oh, I don't want you to activate that model, and you say, yeah, sure, fine, but I don't want to activate that model. I want to shoot you with a laser from my ship, and you cannot affect that. I think this is how it works. I might be wrong, but
I think that the APT beam still goes through, and also to note, the Grizzly Trophy won't affect it because it affects attack characteristics of weapons that you're equipped with, and you're not equipped with a orbital beam.
With a spaceship.
It's with a spaceship. It's coming from somewhere else, so don't get caught out with that. I think that would still hit you, but I think like the assassin doesn't enjoy being injured and having 1 less attack dice or anything like that, and the auras that you can potentially play with these people if you keep the guys near enough to each other, so you have some overlapping abilities, can be can be really strong, right? Because you could have potentially a Grizzly trophy overlapping with -1 weapon skill, ballistic skill, overlapping with, no rerolls, and suddenly you can take one of the best models in the game. But if you say you're now -1 to hit, -1 attack, and and you don't have any rerolls, suddenly they're not that good. And that it can become really brutal. And that's a weird stacking effect of 3 elites. But
Yeah,
just
yeah. I'd say like on one hand we say okay, so you can still shoot them with the laser from the starship and spaceship we look at Elysian Star Striders. However, if the pilot of Nemesis Claw is a good player, then they will imagine 2-inch circles painted in red around those operatives from the Star Striders, and they'll be like, just don't stand on the red.
yeah.
and and this is what they have to remember. And yeah, of course you can say, oh yeah, you can move in after they activate the operative, but we need to remember that such positional play for the support asset from the Star Striders will prove to be much more difficult with Vox Scream and Pressings tokens, because ultimately the Nemesis Claw player, if they really want to, they will be able to almost even out the amount of activations between them and a 10-man kill team.
Yeah, and it's, I think that's where the strength is. I think turn 1 you're going to generate a CP and you're going to keep your prescience tokens because you're going to be out activated whatever happens. And then turn 2, it's the being able to see what the board state is and go, oh, we'll see what happens. But potentially, if you're playing against higher tech, say, you might just use your delays and then they no longer have activation advantage. That could be crazy. So it depends on how many operatives your enemy team is, but it gives you a lot of strength. And again, in the elite matchups, if you're playing against another elite team, it guarantees you the last activation. And that is so strong.
That's absolutely brutal.
It's so strong. So I think they are by far the best elite team. I think they can break through the glass ceiling, particularly now that we've seen Vet Guard get toned down a little bit. I'm hopeful, but I think they're one of the better teams in the game. I think right now, so if we were to go through and have a look at our tier list, in S tier we've got Felgor, Pathfinders, Commandos, and Mandrakes. I think we're pretty happy with that.
Oh, I thought we were doing it upside down. No.
Felgor are the worst team in the game. In the A tier, we have Hierotech, Hearthkin, Nemesis Claw, Gelapox, Wormblade, Star Striders, and Blooded. I think that seems pretty fair. I'm almost tempted to put Blooded above Star Strided. I don't know. Well, I think we'll leave them there.
Or maybe we should swap Star Striders with Blooded.
I think that might
just
be
because if you look at the very top of the tier list, I think Star Striders might struggle into certain matchups from the top of the tier list more than Blooded would, because Blooded ultimately are about threat saturations in melee.
All 4 of those S tier.
Whereas with Blooded, you can certainly play some of those matchups.
Yeah, true. For instance, Star Striders versus Felgor, I think so. I don't even know what you do in that matchup, if I'm honest. It's not good. B+ tier, we have Novitiates at the top, Inquisition, Kazakin, Hunterclade, Breachers, and Vetguard. And then... Here my comment would be that ultimately, I think I like Vetguard more than Breachers. Because they play mission better. But yeah, I know I'm not huge on Breachers. I don't really... 14 versus 12. It's an interesting one. I think... I don't know. I think a good Breachers player is going to have the reliability and the double kill potential over a good Vetguard player more often than not, is my bet. So,
okay.
Because if you have the GA2s in the right place, you could potentially get a GA2 grenade with say an Axe Jack, and now you've tied up a model, killed a model. If they in Death Atonement in the wrong place, you could potentially use that GA2 to tie up people where you need them. Straight down. I don't know. I just think that...
Considering that I don't really regard Breaches as a powerful team. I'm glad that you're not giving me any reason to paint my vet guard.
Yes, the poor Kriegers, the poor Kriegers. All right, so B tier, Chaos Cults, Warp Coven, which might be dangerously high. We'll see. We'll see how time plays out. Yeah, we'll see. Legionary, Corsairs, Phobos, and Strikeforce Justian. Interesting to see where most of the elites are sitting right now. B
I think
minus.
some
Sorry,
people might want to crucify us for leaving Warp Coven in B after the solid buff that they received. But our argument, as I understand, is look at B plus and above and tell us where they will have an easy game.
Yeah, like over half the field for them is still tough, I think. Yeah, I agree. Then B minus, Intercession, Exaction Squadron, Void Dancers, I think seems fair. And C tier is where we're going to get the most amount of hate, but I don't disagree with where they play. I think all of those teams, I would like to see them get something to change the way that they operate. Did you want to quickly touch on companion teams? Noting we're 3 hours in, but
Yeah, time flies, but
yeah,
yeah, it was a great conversation. Yeah, I'd say like with compendium, ultimately we have to remember that if you're bringing a compendium team to a tournament, and this is ultimately a competitive tier list, um, you're you you made a decision not to set your expectations too high. Obviously, you'll have better chances with some teams like Tyranids, like Science, uh, because of their free mission action and lots of AP weapons, like Custodes, because they just beat the base stat line of many other teams, or Death Guard. But yeah, like at the same time, we have to consider that like you probably for each of those teams, you probably have an equivalent in bespoke section that does the same thing but better.
yeah,
So in a way, this is what we have to consider. However, on an occasion, you will see some players doing well with either High Fleet or Custodes. There were cases where Custodians like won events, even though we were deeply into the second edition of Kill Team. So yeah, there we are. And what I would say as well is that this is obviously just a loose conversation based on our opinions, and it's nothing set in stone. And it might be that some teams will prove to be way better or way worse than we estimated them to be. But yeah, like I think this more or less wraps it up. Would you say that
yeah. I completely agree.
makes sense?
And I think we touched on sort of the top teams there. If you want our opinion, I think Tyranids, the original Imperial Guard, Custodes, Death Guard, Chaos Demons, and weirdly, I think the Breaches out of, and pretty much only the Breaches out of the Tau Compendium, because they can get 3 inches, like ignore cover, balanced, hitting on threes, AP1 guns that are 4/5 damage. And then after that, you have your sort of like brand new to the game teams like Grey Knights. But I agree with you, like, you would be better off taking a different team. I think you'd have more options available to you, and the players that we see winning with those teams are winning because they're really good players, not because the companion team is really good. If that makes sense.
Oh yeah,
So
yeah, of course.
it's not there's no secret sauce hidden in compendium that someone hasn't found yet. In my opinion, it's just good players running with good teams.
Yeah, I would say like if you really, really want to take a companion team, then you can obviously consider High Fleet with 10 Gene Stealers plus 6 Warriors list. You can consider Science because they can get up to 12 activations, and they can get lots of AP weapons if they want to. Custodes because they're very tough. Then I would probably say Demons are better than Death Guard because simply because you can take 12 of them and
Yeah,
they're
that's true.
decent in
That's
melee.
true.
And they may prove on certain maps they may prove to be surprisingly good into some better teams. simply because if you're running them into a melee team and you have more bodies and all of them have power weapons, that might be good enough. But ultimately, we know that they are still a compendium. So yeah, there
Yeah,
we are.
agreed. So what we covered there is a lot of subjective opinions from competitive players about where the meta sits. But you do know some people that are a little bit more objective about the game and perhaps might be able to provide a different look other than opinions. Do you want to talk about some of the stats that are available to people online?
Yeah, so thanks for the shout out, and I wanted to mention that if you're interested in tracking almost live changes to win rates and pickup rate of certain teams and statistics when it comes to kill team, I would recommend you go to Kill Team Stats. I think there will be a link in the video description.
Yeah, we'll check it at the bottom.
Have a look at that. This project is run by my longtime friends. Shout out to Piotrek and Michał. And they're doing a really good job making sure that they download the data from BCP. So it's nothing taken, out of thin air. It's solid data from BCP and the tournaments that are being run in Kill Team. And yeah, there you can track the win rate. Of course, statistics are there to help us, but given that we're a small system, all things considered, they will not always reflect the actual power level of all the teams. Like I remember that in past months, like novitiates had like crazy win percentage across the board, which would indicate that the best players with the team would probably win more games that they play. So yeah, there's that. But even like putting that aside, stats can prove to be really helpful when we want to prepare ourselves for a tournament or we want to get a gist of what the meta looks like. And in many ways, there will be a better source of objective information about the game and its state than those tier lists, because the tier lists are ultimately always biased. Like this one will be biased by my view and Ryan's view, and yeah, if you look at other content creators, they will have their own view, and if you put those tier lists one next to another, there maybe aside of the S tier, they very rarely match up. So
Yeah,
that's
true.
a good testament to the fact that tier lists are ultimately subjective. So if you want raw data, go to Kill Team Stats and see what's up there.
Ideal. Completely agree. And like, I'm hoping that when people listen to this back, because we did talk for quite a while on these things, but I think what I'm hoping it gave people is like some really in-depth analysis as to why we think those teams sit where they sit. Because not everything is as you said, completely transparent in stats or vice versa. And maybe our opinion is not necessarily represented, because for a long time, I, for instance, thought Blades of Cain would be really good because I thought there was potential there, but that potential has never been realised. So, and we've seen that now months on. So that's been a hopefully very, very interesting chat for people, and I think people will take a lot away from it. Bart, like, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast and talking to me for such a massive long period of time, because we even had chat before this. So I appreciate I've stolen your evening from you. Before we close out the show, is there anything else that you wanted to shout out? Any like things you want to try and plug before I close us off here?
Yeah, like first of all, thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure and a great time discussing the new meta game and the tier list. I had a ton of fun, and yeah, I'll be always happy to return to the podcast in the future if you would ever want to have another conversation with a jester like me. Other than that, to all the listeners, I hope you had fun listening to this podcast, and all I can say is play more Kill Team and play more games, and yeah, help our community grow.
Absolutely, I echo that completely. To all the Scout players and Hands of the Archon players that are there telling me how wrong I am, and they're actually S tier, get out there, get them on the table and prove me wrong. Drive that win percentage. up, and then I'll eat my words and make a public apology. Thank you again, Bart. It's been absolutely awesome. That is going to bring us to the end of this episode, and hopefully you found something new or useful while listening. If you did, throwing us a like would be greatly appreciated, and share this with your friends so they can benefit as well, and they can hear the thoughts of both myself and Bart talking about all these teams and what we think makes them to tick. If you want to make sure you don't miss any episodes, make sure you hit that subscribe button and select the bell icon as well, so you get notifications as soon as the next one drops. That really is the best way to help a small YouTube channel like ours. If you can't wait and you do want early access, you can join the Patreon, where you get exclusive access to all of our content ahead of time, as well as some exclusive videos, access to our Patreon-only Discord, tournament rewards, and all that sort of good stuff. If you are an existing patron, let me once again just take this moment to say a massive thank you for your support. You are what keeps this channel going, and it really is appreciated. As always, we'd love to hear your thoughts and feedback, so drop a comment below and we'll get right to you. Thank you so much for listening. I'm your host, Ryan. This has been Turning Point Tactics, and we'll see you next week.